Welcome, friend, tonight. We begin with something so simple that most of us overlook it completely. Before we tell stories, before we speak of gates, walls, or journeys, just notice this quiet moment you are in right now. Perhaps it is late where you are. Perhaps the room is dim and the world outside has grown soft and still. Wherever you are listening from, let yourself arrive here gently. You do not need to understand anything tonight. You do not need to solve anything. You do not need to improve yourself. Just listen. There is a subtle feeling many of us carry through life, a sense that something is just out of reach, that peace is close but not quite here, that fulfillment exists but not yet. We tell ourselves that if we grow a little more, accomplish a little more, heal a little more, then finally we will arrive. It can feel as though there is a barrier between where we are and where we believe we should be. A quiet wall, an invisible gate. We push against it with effort. We prepare ourselves to cross it. We wait for the right moment to pass through. And yet tonight, we begin with a gentle question. What if there is no wall? What if the barrier you have been feeling is not made of stone or circumstance, but of belief? Take a slow breath. Notice how your body is already resting exactly where it is. Notice how this moment does not demand anything from you. It is simply here. So much of our exhaustion comes from believing we are not yet where we need to be. From believing there is a gate to pass through before we can finally relax. But what if you have been standing in the garden all along? What if you have been home the entire time? Tonight here on The Long Night, we will move slowly. We will not rush toward conclusions. We will not try to force insight. Instead, we will explore this idea gently through stories. Stories of seekers and wanderers, of musicians and monks, of people who spent years searching for a gate that was never there. If this space brings you calm, if these quiet journeys help soften your evenings, consider supporting The Long Night by subscribing or simply by returning whenever you need stillness. Your presence here is already more than enough. For now, just settle in. Let your breathing slow. Let the weight of the day rest a little. There's nothing you need to achieve tonight, nothing you need to fix, only this quiet listening and a gentle invitation to look at the wall you believe stands before you and wonder whether it was ever there at all. From the time we are very young, we begin to feel it. A small gap between who we are and who we think we should be. A quiet distance between this moment and some imagined better one. We may not have words for it yet, but the feeling is there. If only I were smarter. If only I were calmer. If only I were more successful. If only I were somewhere else. And so, the idea of a crossing is born. We begin to believe that life is divided into two sides. This side, where we are now, and the other side, where peace lives. We imagine there must be a threshold between them. A gate we have not yet found. A door we have not yet earned the right to open. Some of us try to break through it with effort. We read more. We work harder. We improve ourselves endlessly. Others wait patiently for the right conditions, for the children to grow, for the money to come, for the fear to disappear. Some of us travel, some of us retreat. Some of us meditate for years, believing that one day we will cross over. But tonight we pause, not to deny growth, not to dismiss effort, but to look carefully at this gate we believe stands before us. Where is it? Can you see its edges? Can you touch its surface? Or is it made of something far more subtle? The teaching we will explore tonight is simple, almost unsettling in its simplicity. The gate was never closed. In fact, there was never a gate at all. The separation between you and peace has always been imagined. The distance between you and home has always been conceptual. You have been standing exactly where you needed to be. Only the belief in somewhere else made it feel otherwise. This does not mean life has no challenges. It does not mean pain is unreal. It does not mean effort has no place. It simply means that the deepest peace you seek is not waiting on the other side of improvement. It is not postponed until you become different. It is available now, not as an idea, not as something dramatic, but as a quiet recognition. Over the next stories, we will meet wanderers who searched for hidden gardens, artists who waited for perfection, students who longed for approval, travelers who circled the world only to return home. And through each story, you may begin to notice something softening inside you. A small relaxation, a loosening of the belief that you are not yet there. There is nowhere else to arrive. There is no future version of you holding the key. You are already standing in the garden. You are already on the other side. Take a slow breath. Let that possibility rest in you without forcing it to make sense. There is nothing to grasp, nothing to prove, nothing to push through, just listening, just being. And as we begin our first story, let yourself consider this gentle question. If there is no wall, what would it feel like to stop pushing? Let us begin. In a valley surrounded by soft blue mountains, there once lived a young man named Ren. From the outside, his life appeared simple and complete. He worked in the fields beside his family. He ate warm meals at a wooden table each evening. He slept beneath a roof that had sheltered generations before him. And yet, even as a child, Ren carried a quiet restlessness in his chest. It was not loud. It did not demand attention, but it was always there. When he watched the older villagers laugh together, he would wonder why their faces looked so settled. When he walked past the river at sunset, he would feel a strange ache, as though something beautiful was almost within reach, but not quite. He told himself that perhaps he was simply meant for something more. Perhaps this valley was only the beginning. Travelers sometimes passed through the village on their way to distant provinces. They brought spices Ren had never smelled before. They told stories of cities where lanterns burned all night and of monasteries hidden high in the mountains. And once, when Ren was still young, an old traveler spoke of a hidden garden. It was said to be somewhere beyond the far ridges, a place of extraordinary peace. Those who entered the garden, the traveler whispered, found something that dissolved their restlessness forever. A stillness deeper than sleep. A clarity brighter than daylight. Ren felt something ignite inside him when he heard this. The hidden garden. That must be it. That must be what he had been feeling all his life, the sense that there was somewhere else to go, something else to find. He began to imagine what the garden looked like. Walls of stone covered in ivy, an entrance gate carved from ancient wood, soft light falling through leaves that never withered, and beyond that gate, finally, peace. Years passed and the restlessness did not fade. It deepened. Ren began saving what little he earned from his work in the fields. He asked every traveler about the garden. Most had never heard of it. A few had heard rumors, always vague, always pointing in different directions. It lies beyond the eastern mountains, one said. No farther west, said another. but no one could tell him exactly where. This only strengthened his belief. If it were easy to find, everyone would have found it. If it were obvious, everyone would be at peace. The difficulty proved its value. And so, one spring morning before the sun had fully risen, Ren left the valley. He told his family he was going in search of wisdom. He told himself he was going in search of the garden. The first days felt exhilarating. The air in the higher mountains was thinner, sharper. Each step away from the familiar felt like progress. He imagined himself moving closer to the gate. Weeks became months. Months became years. He crossed rivers on narrow bridges that swayed beneath his weight. He slept beneath stars in unfamiliar lands. He worked odd jobs to earn food and coin, always asking about the hidden garden. Some laughed at him, some pitied him, some listened with thoughtful silence. Once in a distant village, a monk told him quietly, "Many search for that garden." "Have you found it?" Ren asked. The monk smiled but did not answer. Ren took the smile as confirmation. He simply needed to continue. He refined his imagination of the garden over time. It grew more detailed, more perfect. In his mind, it was separated clearly from the ordinary world. There would be a threshold, a moment of crossing, a clear line between outside and inside. When he passed through that gate, everything would change. The restlessness would end. The searching would stop. He would finally feel complete. But the years continued. Ren's face grew weathered. His steps slowed. He began to notice something unsettling. Every valley he entered was beautiful. Every river shimmered in sunlight. Birdsong filled forests he passed through. And yet none of it felt like the garden, because none of it had the gate. There were no stone walls covered in ivy, no carved wooden entrance, no dramatic moment of arrival. Just ordinary landscapes, ordinary people, ordinary days. And so he kept walking. One afternoon, long after his hair had begun to show threads of gray, Ren found himself in a valley unlike the others. Wildflowers covered the hillsides in colors so vivid they almost seemed unreal. The air was warm and still. A narrow path wound through the valley toward a small tea stall shaded by a faded cloth canopy. An old woman sat beside the stall, pouring tea into a simple clay cup. Ren approached slowly. His legs were tired, his heart more tired still. He sat across from her without speaking. She looked at him for a long moment, not with curiosity, not with judgment, just with quiet attention. "You have been walking a long time," she said. Ren nodded. "I am searching for a garden," he replied, his voice hoarse from years of dust and wind. "A hidden garden beyond the mountains. They say those who enter it find lasting peace." The old woman did not react with surprise. She simply poured tea and handed him the cup. "And how long have you been searching?" she asked. Ren looked down at his hands. They were no longer the hands of a young man. "Most of my life," he said. The old woman nodded gently. "And what do you imagine this garden looks like?" Ren closed his eyes. He had imagined it so many times. He described the walls, the gate, the golden light, the stillness that would greet him when he finally crossed the threshold. When he finished, the valley around them had grown even quieter. The old woman lifted her hand slowly and gestured to the hills. "Tell me," she said softly. "What do you see here?" And opened his eyes. He saw wildflowers moving gently in the breeze. He saw sunlight resting on distant slopes. He heard birds weaving their songs through the air. But something in him resisted. "This cannot be it," he said. "There are no walls, no entrance. It is just an ordinary valley." The old woman smiled. "Ah," she said, "the walls." She leaned slightly closer. "And who told you there would be walls?" Ren hesitated. The stories had never mentioned walls explicitly. He had simply assumed them. There had to be a boundary, a separation. Otherwise, how would he know he had arrived? The old woman watched him carefully. "And if there were no walls?" she asked quietly. Ren felt something stir, not yet understanding, but something beginning to loosen. If there were no walls, then what had he been searching for? He looked again at the valley. The breeze moved through the flowers without asking permission. The birds sang without needing a gate to pass through. The sunlight fell freely across everything, and for the first time in many years, Ren did not immediately look ahead to the next mountain. He simply sat, holding a warm cup of tea, in an ordinary valley, with no visible gate. Something inside him trembled, not yet broken, but beginning. Ren kept his eyes on the valley as though afraid that if he blinked, it would disappear. For years he had believed that arrival would feel dramatic. There would be a visible crossing, a clear before and after. Yet nothing in this valley announced itself as extraordinary. The old woman sipped her tea. She did not rush him. "You have walked very far," she said after a while. "But tell me honestly, during all those years, did the sky ever refuse to open above you?" Ren frowned slightly. "No." "Did the rivers deny you their sound?" "No." "Did the wind ever wait for you to become worthy before touching your face?" Ren felt a quiet warmth in his chest. "No." The old woman nodded. "And yet you believed peace was somewhere else." Ren lowered his gaze. He had believed it completely. The peace he longed for must exist beyond effort, beyond endurance, beyond distance. It had to be protected by walls. Otherwise, why had he not already found it? He looked around again. The valley was not perfect. There were stones scattered along the path. Some flowers had begun to wilt in the late afternoon sun. His own body ached from years of walking. "This place is beautiful," he admitted softly. "But it is ordinary." The old woman smiled. "Yes." She set her cup down. "And what if the garden you seek is not separate from the ordinary?" The words did not strike like lightning. They settled slowly, like dust drifting in still air. Ren felt resistance rise again. If this were true, then his entire journey had been unnecessary. All the mountains, all the years, all the longing. He felt a flicker of anger. "Then why did I feel so restless?" he asked. "Why did something always feel missing?" The old woman did not look away from him. "Because you believed it was missing." The sentence landed gently, yet it seemed to echo. "You mistook longing for direction," she continued. "You mistook restlessness for a map." Ren felt his breathing change, slower, deeper. The old woman gestured again toward the valley. "Close your eyes," she said. He hesitated but obeyed. "Without imagining a gate," she said softly. "Without imagining arrival, what is here?" Ren listened. Wind moving through tall grass. A distant bird calling once then again. The warmth of sunlight against his cheek. The steady rhythm of his own breath. Nothing extraordinary, nothing mystical, just this. And beneath it, something he had not allowed himself to feel for years. A subtle ease, not the triumphant relief he had imagined. Not a dramatic dissolving of all problems, but a quiet absence of urgency. For the first time since he had left his valley long ago, he did not feel the need to go anywhere. He opened his eyes slowly. The hills were the same. The flowers were the same. The old woman was still watching him. "What changed?" she asked. Ren searched for an answer. "Nothing," he said. She nodded, and yet Ren swallowed. "And yet, I am not searching in this moment." The old woman's eyes softened. "There were never walls," she said quietly. "You built them from expectation." Ren felt tears rise not from sadness but from recognition. He had imagined a carved wooden gate. He had imagined crossing into a different reality. But there had never been a border between where he stood and what he sought. The valley did not transform. The sky did not open in revelation. What shifted was simpler. He stopped leaning forward into an imagined elsewhere. He looked at his hands, older now, lined and rough. They had carried him across continents, and all that time the garden had not been hidden behind mountains. It had been hidden behind belief. The belief that peace must feel different. The belief that arrival must be dramatic. The belief that something was missing. Ren let out a slow breath. For a long time, neither he nor the old woman spoke. Finally, he asked, "Was the journey meaningless?" The old woman shook her head. "No journey is meaningless," she said. "You had to exhaust the idea of elsewhere before you could rest here." Ren considered this. Perhaps the mountains had not been obstacles. Perhaps they had been mirrors, reflecting back his own assumptions. He looked once more at the valley, at its ordinary beauty. There was no gate to pass through, no ceremony of arrival, just wildflowers moving gently in the wind. And a man who, for the first time in decades, was no longer trying to cross into a different life. As the sun began to lower behind the hills, Ren felt something that had once seemed impossibly distant. Not ecstasy, not perfection, just enoughness. He did not need to stay in this valley forever. He did not need to reject the world he had left behind. But wherever he walked next, he knew something he had never understood before. There would be no gate waiting, because there had never been one. And in that recognition, he finally rested. Ren's discovery was quiet. There were no fireworks, no grand proclamation. Just the gentle realization that nothing had ever stood between him and the peace he sought. And yet, even after hearing such a story, something inside us may still whisper, "Yes, but what if I am not ready? What if there truly is something I must achieve first? Some skill I must perfect, some test I must pass, some approval I must earn?" The belief in walls is subtle. When one illusion falls, another often takes its place. If there is no gate in the world outside, perhaps there is still a gate within us. A gate guarded by doubt, by the feeling of not being good enough. And so, let us turn to another story. Not of a man crossing mountains, but of a young woman standing in a workshop holding clay in her hands and believing with all her heart that she must prove herself worthy before she can enter the garden. Let us meet her now. In a small town, known for its pottery, there lived a young craftswoman named Nara. Her hands were steady. Her eye for shape was precise. Even as a child, she could center clay on the wheel with a calm that surprised her teachers. But talent, as she would later discover, is not the same as confidence. Nara apprenticed under several local artisans before finally gaining the opportunity to study under the most respected master in the region, an elderly potter known simply as Master Ishi. It was said that Master Ishii accepted very few students, and among those he accepted only a handful ever received his full acknowledgement. This acknowledgement was whispered about in the workshops, a nod of approval, a single sentence spoken at the right moment. Those who received it were said to have crossed over, to have entered a different level of understanding. Nara had never heard the phrase hidden garden, but she understood gates. To her, the gate was recognition. The gate was the moment when Master Ishii would look at one of her bowls or vases or teacups and say, "Yes, now you are ready." Until that moment, she believed she stood outside, and so she worked. Each morning before sunrise, she entered the workshop while the air was still cool. She kneaded clay until her palms ached. She practiced forming the same simple bowl over and over, searching for the perfect curve. If a rim tilted even slightly, she crushed the piece and began again. If the glaze pooled unevenly, she discarded it without hesitation. Other apprentices chatted as they worked. They laughed when something collapsed. They sometimes kept flawed pieces for themselves. Nara could not understand this. How could they be so relaxed when the test was always near? She imagined Master Ishii watching silently, taking notes, waiting for the precise moment to evaluate her. At night, when she lay down to sleep, she replayed every movement of her day. Was the clay centered enough? Had she moved too quickly? Had she shown impatience? She carried a quiet tension in her shoulders, a subtle tightening in her breath. If she could just perfect her craft, if she could just eliminate every mistake, then perhaps the gate would open. Months passed. Her work improved visibly. Her bowls became thinner, her forms more balanced, her glazes more refined. Visitors to the workshop admired her pieces. Some even purchased them eagerly. But Master Ishii remained quiet. He would glance at her work. Sometimes he would adjust her grip slightly. Occasionally he would say, "Slow down," or "Feel the clay more deeply." But he never said the words she longed to hear. One afternoon, after a piece cracked in the kiln, Nara felt something inside her finally strain too tightly. She waited until the other apprentices had left. The workshop grew dim as evening approached. Master Ishii was cleaning his tools at a long wooden table. Nara approached him, her hands trembling slightly. "Master," she began, trying to keep her voice steady, "when will I be tested?" He did not look up immediately. He continued wiping clay from a carving tool. "Tested?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "When will you decide whether I am ready?" Master Ishii set the tool down slowly and finally met her eyes. "What makes you think I am deciding?" he asked. Nara felt her heart beat faster. "Everyone knows," she said. "You watch us, you wait, and one day you choose." Master Ishii studied her for a long moment. "And what would change?" he asked gently. If I chose, Nara was startled by the question. "What would change?" she repeated. "Yes," he said. "Would the clay feel different beneath your hands? Would the wheel turn more smoothly? Would your breath become steadier?" Nara hesitated. She had imagined the moment countless times. She would feel relief, validation, certainty. "I would know," she said finally. "Know what? That I am good enough." The words hung in the air between them. Master Ishii's expression softened, not with pity but with understanding. He gestured toward a shelf lined with finished pieces. "Choose one of your bowls," he said. Nara walked to the shelf and selected one she considered nearly flawless. Its curve was smooth, its glaze even. She brought it back and placed it on the table. Master Ishi rotated it slowly. He ran his finger along the rim. He tapped it lightly to hear its tone. "It holds water," he said. "Yes," Nara replied. "It does not leak. No, it rests evenly." "Yes." He looked at her again. "Then what is it lacking?" Nara opened her mouth and found she had no clear answer. It was not that the bowl was flawed. It was that she was. At least that is what she believed. "I am still learning," she said quietly. Master Ishi nodded. "As are we all." He lifted the bowl and placed it back in her hands. "The clay does not wait for my approval to become a bowl," he said. "The fire does not wait for my approval to harden it." He paused. "Why do you?" The question unsettled her deeply. All this time she had believed there was a gate, a formal crossing from apprentice to master, and until she passed through it, she was incomplete. Master Ishi returned to cleaning his tools. The conversation seemed finished, but Nara stood there, the bowl warm in her hands, feeling something begin to shift. If there was no official test, if there was no hidden ceremony, then what had she been working toward? And more frightening still, who would she be if she stopped trying to prove herself that night? Nara did not sleep easily. She lay awake replaying Master Ishi's question. "Why do you wait?" It sounded simple, almost obvious, but the more she turned it over in her mind, the more she realized how deeply the waiting had shaped her. She had not only been shaping clay, she had been shaping an image of a future self, a version of her who would finally be certain. In her imagination, that future Nara stood on the other side of a gate, calm, unquestioning, unburdened by doubt, and between her current self and that imagined one stood the test. The next morning, she returned to the workshop earlier than usual. The sky was still gray, the room silent. She placed a lump of clay on the wheel. Her hands rested on it unmoving. For the first time in years, she did not begin with the thought, "This must be perfect." Instead, she asked herself quietly, "What if there is no gate?" The wheel began to turn. The clay rose beneath her fingers. Not because she forced it into worthiness, but because she was simply present with it. Her breath felt different. Not tight, not braced. When the rim tilted slightly, she noticed the old reflex, the urge to crush the piece and start over. But she paused. What if the test was never about flawlessness? What if there was no examiner at all? She continued shaping the bowl, allowing small asymmetries to remain, letting the clay show its own character. Later that day, Master Ishi approached her wheel. He watched without speaking. Nara felt the familiar tension flicker in her shoulders, but it did not fully take hold. She did not look up to search his face for approval. She kept her attention on the clay. When she finished, she placed the bowl on the drying shelf without commentary. Master Ishi finally spoke. "What changed?" he asked. Nara considered this. "I stopped trying to pass," she said quietly. He nodded once, and I am not sure she admitted. "The bowl feels alive." Master Ishi picked it up. He turned it slowly in his hands. "It is not symmetrical," he observed. "No," Nara agreed. "There is a slight variation in the rim." "Yes." And yet he said, "Setting it back down, it does not feel strained." Nara felt something soften inside her. For years she had strained toward a moment that might never come. She had built an invisible threshold in her mind, a crossing she believed would transform her from inadequate to worthy. But no such ceremony had ever been promised. No official evaluation had been announced. The gate existed only in her imagination. That evening, as the apprentices gathered to clean the workshop, one of them asked casually, "Has Master Ishi ever given you the nod?" Nara felt the old habit stir the urge to measure herself against an unseen standard. But she simply smiled. "There is no nod," she said. The others laughed, assuming she was being humble. Yet she knew something had shifted. Over the following weeks, her work did not become dramatically better. It did not suddenly win awards or astonish visitors, but something subtle had changed. She no longer worked to cross into another version of herself. She no longer imagined a future moment when she would finally deserve to relax. She began to enjoy the texture of clay again, the quiet hum of the wheel, the warmth of the kiln. The workshop itself, once a place of evaluation, became simply a place of practice. One afternoon, as golden light filled the room, Master Ishi stood beside her again. "You were asking about the test," he said. Nara nodded. "There is no final test," he continued. "There is only this." He gestured toward the spinning wheel. "If you wait to feel ready," he said, "you will always be outside. If you work only to prove yourself, you will never rest." He paused, then added gently, "The clay does not ask if it is worthy to become a bowl. It simply responds to your hands." Nara felt tears prick her eyes, not from shame but from release. All these years, she had stood before a gate that was never locked. She had believed she was outside mastery, outside approval, outside enoughness. But there had never been a barrier, except the one she constructed from doubt. She looked around the workshop, the shelves of bowls, the apprentices laughing, the faint scent of smoke from the kiln. Nothing extraordinary, nothing mystical, just this moment. And for the first time, she did not feel she needed permission to belong within it. There was no crossing, no dramatic recognition, only the quiet understanding that she had never been outside at all. And in that understanding, she continued shaping the clay, not to pass a test, but simply because her hands loved the turning of the wheel. Nara's discovery was subtle. There was no ceremony marking her arrival, no official declaration that she had crossed into worthiness. She simply stopped waiting. And yet, even after hearing this story, a quieter voice may still whisper within us, "I understand. But I am not ready yet. Not ready to begin, not ready to speak, not ready to change." Sometimes we do not fear judgment from others. We fear stepping forward before we feel completely prepared. We imagine that somewhere in the future, a more confident version of ourselves is waiting, stronger, wiser, less afraid. And only when we become that person will we finally move. But what if readiness itself is another invisible gate? What if the feeling of not yet is only another form of standing outside something that has never truly been closed? Let us turn now to a traveler who delayed his journey for years, believing he must first become certain before he could take even a single step. In a quiet riverside town lived a man named Haru. Unlike Ren, he did not wander across mountains. Unlike Nara, he did not strain beneath the gaze of a master. Haru had a different habit. He prepared. From a young age, he felt called to make a pilgrimage to a distant mountain temple, said to hold deep wisdom. Many from his town had gone. Some returned changed. Others chose to remain there for years. Haru dreamed of going as well. But he would not go unprepared. He studied sacred texts carefully, He copied teachings into neat journals. He practiced breathing exercises every morning before sunrise. When friends his age departed for the mountain, Haru told himself he would go soon. Soon when he understood a little more. Soon when his mind was calmer. Soon when he felt truly ready. Years passed gently. Haru grew respected in the town for his knowledge. People came to him with questions. He answered thoughtfully. He spoke about the importance of patience and discipline. Yet privately, he felt something unsettled. He had not gone. Whenever he considered setting out, doubt rose quietly within him. What if the temple masters saw through him? What if they recognized how much he still did not understand? What if he arrived only to realize he was not worthy of being there? Better to prepare more. Better to refine himself further. So he continued studying. He improved his posture. He lengthened his meditation sessions. He memorized long passages of scripture. He imagined the day he would finally begin the pilgrimage. He would walk confidently, his mind clear, his heart steady. The gate would open easily for someone like that. But each year when the time felt close, another thought would arise. Just a little more preparation. Just one more season. The mountain was not going anywhere. When Haru reached his 40th year, a younger friend named Sota came to him one evening. "I am leaving tomorrow for the temple," Sota said, eyes bright with anticipation. Haru nodded approvingly. "You have studied well," he told him. "You are ready." Sota laughed softly. "I don't feel ready at all," he admitted. "But if I wait until I do, I may never leave." The words lingered after Sota departed. "If I wait until I feel ready, I may never leave." Haru sat long into the night. He realized something unsettling. He had built an image of readiness, so precise, so complete, that no living human could meet it. In his imagination, readiness meant the absence of doubt, the absence of fear, the absence of confusion. But doubt still visited him. Fear still whispered. Confusion still flickered in quiet moments. So he remained. From the outside, his life looked stable and admirable. He had not failed, he had not made mistakes, but neither had he stepped onto the path. He had built a gate made of readiness, and he stood patiently before it. One spring morning, as cherry blossoms drifted across the river, Haru felt a sudden ache. He watched petals fall without hesitation. They did not wait to be perfect before letting go of the branch. They did not calculate whether they were prepared for the wind. They simply responded to the season. Something in him trembled. What if readiness was not a feeling to achieve, but a story he had been telling himself? Still he did not move. The mountain remained distant, the temple gates unseen, and Haru continued preparing for a departure that never quite arrived. The day Sota left, the town gathered at the edge of the road to see him off. He carried only a small pack, no heavy books, no carefully copied scrolls. Haru stood among the villagers, offering calm advice. "Walk steadily," he said. "Observe your thoughts. Be patient with yourself." Sota smiled. "I will probably forget half of that," he admitted, and then he began walking. There was no visible gate at the edge of town, no ceremonial arch, no sign marking the beginning of pilgrimage, just a dusty road stretching toward distant hills. Haru watched until Sota became a small shape against the horizon. Something stirred deeply inside him. Not envy, not regret, but recognition. Sota had not looked ready. He had looked uncertain. His steps were not perfectly measured. He had even stumbled once on a loose stone. And yet, he was moving. That evening, Haru returned to a room and opened his journals. Page after page of careful notes, meticulously organized teachings. He had prepared for decades, and still, he did not feel ready. He closed the final journal slowly. The truth rose gently, but clearly. Readiness was not arriving. It was retreating. Every time doubt appeared, he interpreted it as proof that he must wait longer. Every time fear surfaced, he saw it as a sign of immaturity. He had assumed that true readiness meant the disappearance of uncertainty. But perhaps uncertainty was not a barrier. Perhaps it was simply part of being alive. The next morning, Haru walked to the river before sunrise. Mist hovered above the water. The world felt suspended between night and day. He asked himself quietly, if there were no such thing as ready, what would I do? The question did not demand courage. It did not demand clarity. It simply removed the imaginary gate. He stood there for a long time. Fear was still present. Doubt still whispered. His heart did not feel heroic. But something else appeared beneath those sensations. A simple fact: he could take one step. Not because he felt prepared, not because the doubt had vanished, but because the road did not require perfection. The mountain had never sent word demanding proof. The temple had never issued an examination. The only thing that had stopped him was the belief that he must become different before beginning. Haru returned home. He did not pack carefully. He did not consult his journals. He placed a few necessities in a small bag. Nothing more. When neighbors asked where he was going, he answered simply, "To the mountain." They looked surprised. "You feel ready now?" one asked. Haru considered the question. He searched his body, his breath, his thoughts. No dramatic confidence had appeared. No inner voice proclaimed certainty. But he smiled gently. "No," he said, "and that no longer matters." He stepped onto the same dusty road Sota had taken weeks earlier. At first, every sensation felt amplified. The weight of the bag on his shoulder, the uneven ground beneath his feet. His mind still produced anxious thoughts. What if I fail? What if I return unchanged? But he did not interpret these as stop signs. They were simply weather passing through the sky of his mind. With each step, he realized something quietly profound. There was no gate at the edge of the town. No border he had to cross before becoming a pilgrim. The moment he stepped onto the road, he was already walking. The difference between preparing and beginning had been imaginary. For years he had stood before an invisible threshold labeled ready. Now he saw that the threshold dissolved the moment he stopped believing in it. The mountain remained distant, the temple unseen. But something within him had shifted. He was no longer waiting to feel different before moving. He was moving while feeling exactly as he did. And strangely, that was enough. The wind brushed against his face as he walked, unconcerned with whether he deserved the journey, unaware of any test he had passed. The road did not ask if he was prepared. It simply received his footsteps. And in that simple act of walking, Haru discovered what years of preparation had concealed. The gate of readiness had never been locked. It had never even existed. Haru's first step was not dramatic. The sky did not shift. The mountain did not glow with sudden promise. He simply walked. And in walking without waiting to feel ready, he discovered that movement itself dissolves imagined gates. But even when we begin, another illusion often waits quietly ahead. We may stop postponing our journey, but still believe that what we create, what we offer, what we express must be flawless before it truly matters. And we trade readiness for perfection. We exchange hesitation for pressure. If I am going to begin, we tell ourselves, then I must do it perfectly. And so a new gate appears, not at the start of the road, but at the edge of expression. Let us now meet someone who stood before that gate, not afraid to begin, but afraid to be imperfect. In a city where lanterns glowed softly along narrow streets, there lived a young musician named Akio. From childhood, music had come to him naturally. His fingers found melodies on the flute without strain. Notes rose from him as easily as breath. But as he grew older, something shifted. He began to hear not only the music he played, but the flaws within it. A note slightly sharp, a phrase not fully expressed, a tremor in his tone when others listened too closely. At first, these imperfections only motivated him. He practiced longer. He studied great masters. He listened obsessively to recordings of renowned performers. He told himself that excellence required discipline, and discipline required critique. But slowly, his love of music narrowed into vigilance. Where once he played freely in the evenings by the river, now he rarely performed unless he believed he could execute each phrase flawlessly. Friends invited him to gatherings. "Bring your flute," they would say. Akio would smile politely. Another time he replied, "I am still refining my technique." Years passed. He became technically impressive. His scales were clean, his timing precise. Yet something subtle had disappeared. He no longer played in the open air. He no longer allowed spontaneous melodies to wander through twilight. He was waiting for the day when his music would be beyond criticism, waiting for the moment when no mistake would be possible. Only then, he believed, would he truly offer it to the world. One evening, as he practiced alone in his small room, a knock sounded at his door. An elderly neighbor named Wei stood outside. Wei had once been a musician himself, though age had dimmed his eyesight and slowed his steps. "I heard you playing," Wei said gently. "May I sit and listen?" Akio hesitated. He had been working through a difficult passage not yet perfect. "It is not ready," Akio replied. Wei smiled faintly. "Music does not wait to be ready," he said. Akio felt a flicker of irritation. With respect, he invited the old man inside. Wei sat quietly in the corner of the room. Akio lifted the flute to his lips. He intended to demonstrate control, precision, but as he began, he felt the familiar tension tighten his chest. Do not miss the high note. Do not rush the rhythm. Do not fail. The melody became rigid beneath the weight of expectation. When he finished, the room felt heavy. Wei remained silent for a moment. "You play carefully," the old man observed. Akio lowered the flute. "I am working toward mastery," he said. Wei nodded slowly. "And when you reach it," Akio looked toward the window. "When there are no flaws," he said, "then I will perform freely." Wei tilted his head slightly, and until then Akio did not answer. The silence stretched. Outside, distant laughter drifted up from the street. Someone was singing imperfectly, off-key but joyfully. Wei listened to the sound. "Do you hear that?" he asked. Akio frowned. "They are not trained." Wei's expression softened. "No," he agreed, "they are not." He turned back toward Akio. "But they are not waiting. The words unsettled him. Akio had always believed that perfection was the gate, that only flawless expression deserved daylight. Anything less belonged behind closed doors. Wei stood slowly leaning on his cane. "Play something you have not practiced," he said. Akio stiffened. "That would be careless." Wei smiled. "Or honest." The suggestion lingered in the room. Akio looked down at his instrument. For years he had imagined a threshold, a moment when his skill would cross from adequate to extraordinary, and only then would he allow himself to be heard. But what if that threshold was like Ren's garden wall? What if it existed only in imagination? Still, the fear remained. If he played imperfectly, others might judge him. If he revealed unfinished notes, they might see his limitations. Better to wait, better to refine, better to polish the music until it shone without blemish. Yet something in Wei's presence, calm, unhurried, disturbed the certainty of that plan. Wei moved toward the door. "Perfection is a quiet prison," he said softly, and then he left. Akio stood alone in the dim room, flute in hand. The melody he had practiced so carefully hovered in his mind. But beneath it, another tune stirred, unstructured, unfinished. He lifted the flute again. Not to prove anything, not to impress, but simply to see what would happen if he stopped waiting for flawless conditions. His fingers hesitated above the holes. The gate of perfection stood before him, invisible but powerful, and for the first time he wondered whether it was ever truly there. Akio stood very still. The room felt smaller than before, not because its walls had moved, but because his attention had narrowed to a single question. What happens if I allow imperfection? He lowered the flute slightly. For years he had believed that perfection was the doorway to freedom. If he could eliminate error, if he could polish every phrase, then he would finally play without fear. But the fear had not decreased. It had grown. The more precise he became, the more fragile each performance felt. One small mistake could shatter the illusion. He realized something unsettling. Perfection had not freed him. It had confined him. He brought the flute back to his lips. This time he did not choose the piece he had practiced for months. He allowed his fingers to move without a plan. The first notes were hesitant, unsteady. His breath wavered slightly. A small voice inside him reacted immediately. There, that note was thin. There, the transition was rough. But instead of stopping, he continued. He did not rush to correct. He did not clamp down in control. He let the melody unfold as it wished. Something unexpected happened. The music, though imperfect, felt alive. It carried emotion that his rehearsed pieces often lacked. There was vulnerability in it, space. A phrase bent unexpectedly. Another lingered longer than planned. He felt exposed, but also present. For the first time in years, he was not performing against an internal judge. He was simply playing. When the final note faded, the room felt lighter. No applause followed, no dramatic revelation. Only quiet, and within that quiet, a realization. The note that trembled had not destroyed the music, it had deepened it. The slight imperfection did not close a gate. It dissolved one. Akio sat down slowly. He examined the belief that had governed him for so long. If I am not flawless, I must wait. But wait for what? For a day when he would be superhuman, for a future self immune to error. He thought of Wei's words. Perfection is a quiet prison. He understood now. A prison does not always have bars. Sometimes it is built from standards so rigid that nothing living can pass through them. Over the following days, Akio began doing something radical. He played outside, not in grand halls, not in formal recitals, but by the river at dusk, on street corners, in small gatherings where children chased one another and elders spoke over tea. His music was not immaculate. Occasionally a note cracked, sometimes his timing slipped, but something else filled the space: warmth, connection, joy. One evening as he played beneath lantern light, a child approached him. "That part sounded like laughing," the child said. Akio blinked. He had not intended laughter, but perhaps the music had found it on its own. Wei stood at a distance, listening quietly. When Akio finished, the old man gave a small nod. Not a ceremonial one, not a declaration of mastery, just recognition. Later, as they walked home together, Wei spoke softly. "The gate you feared," he said, "was not between you and the world. It was between you and your own expression." Akio nodded. He had believed that perfection protected him, but it had kept him silent. "The world does not need flawless music," Wei continued. "It needs honest music." Akio looked up at the night sky. Lantern light flickered against dark rooftops. Voices drifted from open windows. Nothing was perfectly arranged, nothing symmetrical, yet everything belonged. He realized then that the threshold he had imagined, the crossing from imperfect to perfect, had never been required. The moment he allowed the music to tremble, the gate dissolved, and what remained was simpler than mastery. It was participation. He was no longer standing outside his own life, waiting to be flawless before entering. He was inside it, breathing with it, sounding through it. The note did not need to be perfect. It only needed to be played. Akio discovered that perfection had never been the doorway to freedom. The moment he allowed a note to tremble, he stepped fully into his own life. And yet, even after releasing perfection, another subtle gate can remain. We may begin, we may express, we may even accept imperfection. But somewhere inside, a quiet hope still lingers that someone will see us, that someone will confirm we have arrived, that someone will say, "Now you are enough." We tell ourselves we are no longer waiting, but we still lean toward recognition, toward validation, toward the moment when another voice completes what we doubt within ourselves. And so let us turn to a story of someone who believed that the final crossing would not come from her own understanding, but from the approval of another. In a quiet monastery, nestled among tall cedar trees, lived a young student named Emmy. She had arrived at the monastery at 16, carrying little more than a small bag of clothes and a heart full of questions. From the beginning, she was diligent. She woke before the morning bell. She swept the stone courtyard carefully, making sure no leaf remained in the corners. She listened intently to the teachings, memorizing passages, long after the others had gone to rest. The senior monks often praised her discipline. "You are sincere," they would say. But sincerity was not what Emmy sought. She wanted something else. In the monastery there was a quiet tradition. Occasionally, when a student had ripened in understanding, the abbot would call them into his chamber. The conversation was brief. Sometimes only a few words were spoken. Afterward, the student would bow deeply and return to the courtyard with a different expression, lighter, clearer. No one described exactly what happened in that room, but everyone knew what it meant. Recognition. The abbot had seen something in them, had confirmed that their practice had matured. Emmy watched carefully. Each time a student was summoned, her heart fluttered. Will I be next year's past? She studied the sutras. She meditated through cold winters. She endured long hours of silence without complaint. Whenever doubt arose, she tightened her effort. Whenever distraction appeared, she disciplined herself more strictly. If she could just refine her practice, if she could just purify her intentions, then surely the abbot would call her. At night, lying on her thin mattress, she imagined the moment. The knock on her door, the quiet walk down the wooden corridor, the abbot's steady gaze. He would say something simple, perhaps only yes. And in that single word, all her years of striving would crystallize into certainty. Until then, she felt suspended, not quite inside, not yet fully seen. One autumn afternoon, as leaves turned gold outside the meditation hall, Emmy gathered her courage and approached the abbot herself. He was tending a small garden behind the temple, trimming branches with careful attention. "Master," she said softly, bowing deeply, "may I ask you something?" He nodded without looking up. How does one know? She began carefully when their practice has matured. The abbot paused. He set his shears down and studied her face. "Why do you ask?" he replied. Emmy hesitated. She wanted to sound humble, detached, but honesty pressed forward. "I have practiced for many years," she said. "I have tried to be diligent, yet I do not know if I have truly understood. I do not know if I am ready." The word felt strangely familiar. Ready. The abbot's eyes softened slightly. "And what would change," he asked, "if you knew?" Emmy lowered her gaze. "I would feel certain," she admitted. "I would know I have crossed something." "Crossed what?" he asked, gently. She searched for an answer. "A threshold," she said at last. "From student to something more." The abbot turned back to the garden and plucked a small withered leaf from a branch. "Emmy," he said quietly, "when does a leaf become a leaf?" She blinked. "I do not understand." "When the bud appears," he continued, "when it unfolds, when it is fully green, when it begins to fall." Emmy remained silent. The abbot placed the leaf in her palm, at which moment he asked, did it cross into being what it already was? Emmy felt a subtle confusion. She had imagined her practice like a staircase, each year another step upward, at the top, recognition. But the abbot spoke as though there were no staircase at all. She looked up. "Then, there is no crossing?" she asked. The abbot smiled faintly. "There is practice," he said. "There is attention, there is sincerity. But the idea that you are waiting outside something." He let the sentence fade. Emmy felt her chest tighten. If there were no official crossing, no moment when the abbot would confirm her arrival, then what had she been waiting for? And more unsettling still, if no one ever called her into that chamber, would her practice be any less real? The wind moved gently through the cedar trees. Golden leaves drifted to the ground without ceremony. The monastery bell sounded in the distance. Emmy stood there holding a single withered leaf, feeling the invisible gate of approval tremble, but not yet fall. That night, Emmy returned to her small room, with the withered leaf still resting in her palm. She placed it carefully on the wooden table beside her bed. At which moment did it cross into being what it already was? The question unsettled her more than any riddle from the sutras. For years, she had believed that practice moved toward a visible acknowledgement. A nod, a summons, a quiet confirmation that she had arrived. Without that moment, she felt suspended, as though her entire spiritual life existed in a waiting room. The following days passed as usual. Morning bells, sweeping courtyards, silent meditation. But something in her awareness had shifted. Each time she bowed in the meditation hall, she noticed the subtle hope beneath the gesture. Will this be the day? Will he see me now? She had believed she was devoted to truth, yet she saw now that she was also devoted to being seen. During meditation, she observed her thoughts more closely. They circled, not around understanding, but around recognition. If I am called into the chamber, it will mean I am enough. If I am not, it will mean I still lack something. The gate of approval had quietly shaped every breath. One afternoon, a younger novice approached her. "Emmy," he asked shyly, "how do you know if your practice is improving?" She almost repeated the answer she had rehearsed for years. "Work harder, concentrate more, be patient." But instead she paused. "How do you know?" She looked at him and saw the same hunger in his eyes, the same leaning towards some future confirmation. "I don't know," she said honestly. The novice looked confused. "I used to think someone would tell me," she continued softly. "But now I am not so sure." That evening, the abbot gave a short teaching in the courtyard. He spoke about the moon reflected in water. When the surface is still, he said, the moon appears clearly. But the moon does not enter the water, nor does the water become the moon. Emmy listened carefully. Understanding, she realized, was not an object transferred from teacher to student. It was not granted like a certificate. It was seen or not seen within one's own clarity. After the teaching, the monks dispersed quietly. Emmy remained seated beneath the cedar trees. She imagined again the chamber she had longed to enter, the quiet room, the brief conversation, and suddenly she saw something startling. Even if the abbot called her tomorrow, even if he smiled and said, "You have understood," would doubt never return? Would confusion never visit her again? Of course it would. No single sentence could permanently silence uncertainty. The approval she sought was not protection from doubt. It was protection from her own insecurity. And insecurity did not dissolve through ceremony. It dissolved through seeing. The next morning, Emmy woke before the bell as usual, but something felt different. She did not sweep the courtyard hoping to be noticed. She did not meditate imagining an unseen evaluation. She practiced because practice was what this moment offered. When the abbot passed her in the corridor, she bowed not in anticipation, but in simple respect. He paused briefly. "You look lighter," he observed. Emmy felt a small smile rise. "I stopped waiting," she replied. The abbot nodded once and continued walking. No summons followed, no chamber door opened, and, strangely, nothing was missing. Days turned into weeks. Other students were occasionally called into the private room. Emmy felt the old reflex stir once or twice, a flicker of comparison. But it did not take root. She began to see that the chamber had never been a gate. It was simply a conversation. The crossing she imagined did not exist. She had been standing in the monastery all along, practicing, breathing, growing. No one had been withholding entry. The sense of being outside had been self-created. One evening, as dusk settled gently over the temple roofs, Emmy sat beneath the cedar trees again. The air was cool, the courtyard quiet. She felt no dramatic awakening, no thunder of realization, only a simple clarity. There was no final approval waiting at the end of the path. There was only this step, this breath, this bow, and in that understanding, The invisible gate of recognition quietly dissolved. She had never been outside. She had never been unapproved. She had only been waiting for a voice that was never required. Emmy had waited for a voice to confirm her belonging. When she stopped waiting, she discovered that nothing had ever been withheld. But there is yet another way we build invisible gates. Sometimes we do not wait for readiness. Sometimes we do not wait for perfection. Sometimes we do not even wait for approval. Instead, we wait for life to change. We tell ourselves, when the circumstances improve, when the children grow, when the work becomes easier, when the pain fades, then I will rest, then I will live. Then I will allow myself peace. The gate shifts from within us into the shape of the world around us. And so let us turn to someone who believed that fulfillment lay on the other side of better conditions. In a bustling coastal town lived a woman named Aiko. Her days were full, not with grand ambitions or distant pilgrimages, but with small, unending responsibilities. She woke before sunrise to prepare breakfast. She helped her children dress for school. She managed accounts for her family's modest shop. She cared for her aging mother in the evenings. From the outside, her life looked steady, ordinary, respectable. Yet inside, she carried a quiet promise. One day when things settle down, I will finally rest. She did not doubt that peace existed. She simply believed it belonged to a later chapter. When the children are older, when the shop is more stable, when my mother no longer needs so much care, then I will breathe deeply. Then I will sit by the sea without worry. Then I will begin living fully. Until then, she endured. She moved through each task with efficiency, but rarely with presence. While washing dishes, she thought about the shop's debts. While helping with homework, she calculated tomorrow's inventory. While sitting beside her mother's bed, she imagined a quieter future. Life felt like a corridor she had to pass through before reaching the real room. Sometimes late at night, she stepped outside to hang laundry beneath the moon. The ocean lay only a short walk away. She could hear the waves breaking softly against the shore. For a moment, she would pause. "This is beautiful," she would think. But immediately another voice would answer, "Yes, but not yet." The sea would still be there tomorrow. Peace could wait. Years moved quietly. Her children grew taller. Her mother's steps grew slower. The shop fluctuated between profit and strain, and still the promised future did not arrive. Whenever one difficulty eased, another emerged. When her son entered secondary school, new expenses appeared. When her mother's health stabilized, her own fatigue deepened. There was always something slightly unsettled, something slightly unfinished. One afternoon, after closing the shop early due to a storm, Aiko found herself unexpectedly free for an hour. The rain had driven customers indoors. Her children were still at school. Her mother slept peacefully. She stood alone in the doorway of the shop, listening to the rain strike the pavement. "This is it," she thought, "the quiet I've been waiting for." But instead of feeling peace, she felt restlessness. Her mind began searching for the next task, the next concern, the next improvement. She realized something unsettling. Even when conditions briefly softened, her inner tension did not. She had trained herself to postpone ease. That evening, as the storm cleared, she walked to the shoreline. Not because everything was resolved, not because life had become simple, but because she was suddenly curious. The ocean stretched wide and gray beneath a clearing sky. Waves rolled in steady rhythm, indifferent to human schedules. She sat on a smooth stone and watched the water. For years she had believed that peace required completion. A finished list, a stable future, a life arranged neatly. But the sea was never finished. It was never still in the way she imagined calm should look. It moved constantly, changed constantly, and yet it was not waiting to become something else. Aiko felt a quiet crack in her assumption. What if peace was not on the other side of better circumstances? What if the gate she had imagined, labeled "When Life Settles," was only a story? The waves did not promise a calmer tomorrow. They simply arrived. Again and again, she inhaled deeply. The salt air filled her lungs. Nothing in her life had changed. Her responsibilities remained. Her tasks unfinished. But for the first time, she was not postponing this moment. She was sitting inside it. The gate of later trembled slightly. Not yet gone, but no longer unquestioned. Aiko remained seated by the sea, long after the clouds had thinned. The horizon did not clear completely. Waves still carried fragments of foam. The wind shifted unpredictably. Nothing about the evening was perfectly arranged. And yet she noticed something surprising. The peace she had imagined for years, that quiet exhale she thought belonged to a future season, was touching her now. Not because her life had simplified, not because her responsibilities had vanished, but because she was no longer leaning into tomorrow. She watched a fisherman pull his boat closer to shore. His movements were steady, unhurried. There was no sign that he had resolved all of life's concerns before stepping into the tide. He simply worked within the weather that existed. Aiko felt a gentle realization unfold. She had built an invisible gate labeled "When Things Calm Down." Behind that gate, she imagined spacious mornings, lighter burdens, a mind free from planning. But life had never promised such conditions. Storms arrived, children grew, aging continued, business rose and fell. There was always movement, always change. If peace required still waters, she might wait forever. She lowered her gaze to her hands. The same hands that balanced accounts, washed dishes, soothed fevers. They were not waiting to become different hands. They simply moved where needed. Why then had she insisted that her heart wait? A memory surfaced. Years earlier, when her first child was born, she had promised herself she would rest once the sleepless nights ended. When those nights ended, new worries replaced them. School fees, illnesses, uncertainty about the future. Each phase carried its own turbulence. She had been chasing a version of life that contained no waves, but the sea before her offered a quiet truth. Movement did not cancel depth. Restlessness on the surface did not eliminate the vastness beneath. Peace was not the absence of motion. It was the willingness to sit within it. Aiko closed her eyes for a moment. The sound of the ocean filled her awareness. Her mother would still need help tomorrow. The shop would still open at dawn. Her children would still argue over small things. Nothing external would soften overnight. But something internal had shifted. She did not need to postpone this breath. She did not need to earn this moment. When she opened her eyes, the world looked the same. Yet it no longer felt like a corridor she had to survive before living. It felt like the room itself. She stood slowly and began walking back toward town. The streets were damp from rain. Lanterns reflected softly in puddles. Ordinary sights. ordinary sounds, and for once she was not hurrying past them toward a later life. At home, her children ran to greet her. Her mother called gently from the bedroom. The familiar rhythm resumed, but Aiko noticed she was moving differently, not with resentment, not with silent calculation about when it would all end, simply with presence. The gate of later had dissolved, not because life had changed, but because she had stopped demanding that it do so before allowing herself peace. And in that quiet recognition, she discovered something she had postponed for years. The sea had not been waiting. Neither had her life. Only she had been. And now she was no longer outside it. Aiko discovered that peace had never been postponed by circumstance. It had only been postponed by belief, and perhaps this is the most subtle gate of all. We search, we strive, we wait, we postpone. Until one day we begin to suspect that what we have been looking for was never located somewhere else. Sometimes after years of movement, the deepest realization is not found at the end of the road, but in returning to where we began. Not as the same person, but with different eyes. Let us now meet someone who traveled far from home, in search of awakening, only to discover that what he sought had always been quietly present in the most ordinary place imaginable. In a small farming village surrounded by wide-open fields lived a man named Daiichi. Unlike Ren, he did not hear tales of hidden gardens. Unlike Haru, he did not spend years preparing for departure. Daiichi simply felt dissatisfied. The village felt too narrow, the routines too predictable, the conversations too familiar. Each morning, he walked the same path to the fields. Each evening, he returned along the same dusty road. He watched seasons pass, planting, harvesting, wintering, planting again. And somewhere inside him grew the quiet conviction that something essential was missing. There must be more than this. Travelers sometimes passed through, speaking of distant monasteries and wandering sages. They described mountain temples where monks meditated for hours in silence. They spoke of enlightenment as though it were a distant summit visible only after great effort. Daiichi listened with increasing intensity. He imagined himself robed in simple cloth, seated beneath ancient trees, finally touching the truth that had eluded him in the village. One evening, after a long day in the fields, he stood outside his small home and looked at the horizon. The sky was streaked with fading orange light. Birds moved in loose patterns above the rooftops. It was beautiful, but he could not feel it fully, because he believed beauty belonged somewhere else. Within months, he made his decision. He would leave. His parents were confused. "Is something wrong here?" his mother asked. "No," Daiichi replied carefully. "I simply need to find what this place cannot give me." And so he left the village. The first monastery he reached was high in the mountains. The climb was difficult. His legs trembled as he ascended steep stone steps. At the gate, a monk greeted him quietly. "I wish to awaken," Daiichi said. The monk nodded and allowed him entry. Life inside the monastery was disciplined. Long hours of sitting, silent meals, strict routines. Daiichi embraced it eagerly. If truth required sacrifice, he would sacrifice. If clarity required endurance, he would endure. Months became years. He moved from one monastery to another, each time believing the next place might hold the key. He meditated through cold dawns. He memorized teachings. He listened to masters speak in paradoxes. Sometimes he experienced moments of stillness, brief flashes of clarity, but they never lasted. Restlessness returned. Perhaps this teacher is not the right one. Perhaps this temple is too rigid. Perhaps I must go farther. And so he kept moving. In distant villages, he met other seekers. They shared stories of breakthroughs, of sudden awakenings beneath waterfalls, of profound realizations in caves. Daiichi compared his experiences to theirs, measured his progress silently. He began to suspect that enlightenment required something extraordinary, a dramatic rupture, a crossing into a different state of being. He imagined a gate, unseen but real, that divided ordinary life from awakened life, and he believed he was still outside it. Years passed. His hair began to gray at the temples. His body carried the fatigue of long journeys. One winter, after leaving yet another monastery, Daiichi found himself walking along a road that felt strangely familiar. The hills, the bend in the river, the scent of the earth. He slowed. A quiet realization dawned. He was approaching his own village. He had not planned to return. He had only been following the easiest road through the valley. As the rooftops came into view, something stirred inside him. Not triumph, not defeat, but uncertainty. What if nothing has changed? What if I left searching for something that was never found? He stood at the edge of the village as evening light settled over the fields. The same path he had walked as a young man lay before him. The same fields, the same quiet rhythm of ordinary life. He felt a flicker of disappointment. Had he traveled all these years only to return where he began? The gate, he had imagined the dramatic crossing into awakened life, had never appeared. And now he stood again in the place he had once rejected. For a long moment he did not move. The wind passed through the tall grasses. Cattle shifted in the distance. Nothing extraordinary greeted him. Just home. And something within him, though he did not yet fully understand it, began to soften. Daiichi stepped slowly onto the familiar road. Each stone beneath his feet felt strangely intimate, as though it recognized him before he recognized himself. A child ran past him laughing, chasing a wooden hoop with a stick. The sound startled him. Once he had been that child, running along this same road without questioning whether life was sufficient. An elderly neighbor, now bent with age, looked up from a garden patch. "Daiichi," the man asked, squinting. He nodded. "You have returned." The words carried no judgment, no accusation of failure, just fact. He walked toward his family's old home. The wooden beams were weathered but sturdy, the door slightly faded. Nothing had transformed into something grander. No hidden glow, no sacred aura. Only the same ordinary structure he had once left behind. His mother, now slower in movement, opened the door and stared at him in disbelief. "You have come back," she whispered. He bowed his head. That evening, he sat at the same low table where he had eaten countless meals in his youth. Rice steamed gently in a simple bowl. The scent was familiar. He lifted a spoon. For years he had eaten in monastery silence, believing that sacredness lived in distant halls. Now, sitting in his childhood home, he noticed the warmth of the bowl in his hands, the quiet rhythm of chewing, the sound of wind against the shutters. Nothing mystical, nothing ceremonial. And yet something inside him settled in a way it never had in the mountains. After dinner, he stepped outside. The fields stretched wide beneath a sky scattered with stars. He had seen grander skies in remote regions. He had sat beneath ancient trees older than this village. But here in this unremarkable field, He felt a stillness that did not depend on distance. It did not require altitude. It did not require robes or ritual. It required attention. He remembered all the years he had believed awakening lay somewhere beyond the horizon, somewhere inaccessible to ordinary life. He had imagined a gate separating the mundane from the sacred. But standing now in the very place he once dismissed, he could not find that boundary. The wind moved through crops as it had always done. The same wind that touched monastery walls. The same wind that had brushed his face on distant roads. Had the wind ever been different, or had he simply labeled places as sacred and unsacred, inside and outside, awake and asleep? He closed his eyes. He did not search for a dramatic revelation. He did not strain for insight. He simply stood. The years of wandering had exhausted his expectation of spectacle. They had worn down his belief in a grand crossing, and in that exhaustion something quiet emerged. He saw that he had not been searching for a location. He had been searching for permission to be fully here. In the monastery, he had imagined home as a distraction. In the village, he had imagined monasteries as superior. He had divided the world in two, but the division had never existed outside his own thinking. The gate he believed stood between ordinary life and awakening was made of comparison, and comparison dissolved when he stopped measuring. The next morning, Daiichi rose early and walked to the fields. Not as someone who had failed in distant temples. Not as someone who had achieved enlightenment. Simply as someone walking. He bent down and placed his hands in the soil. The earth was cool and textured. For years he had believed that tending fields was lesser work, a temporary stage before real spiritual life began. Now he felt something startling. There was no lesser work, no preliminary stage, only this movement, this breath, this contact between hand and ground. He began helping neighbors with harvest tasks. He listened more than he spoke. When villagers asked about his travels, he answered simply, "I learned that the road does not end anywhere special." Some nodded politely. Others looked puzzled. But Daiichi no longer felt compelled to convince anyone. He no longer stood outside life waiting to enter it through a dramatic gate. He was home. And not because the village had changed. Not because he had brought enlightenment back with him. But because he had stopped imagining that he had ever left what he sought. The mountains had not been wrong. The temples had not been false. They had simply been mirrors, reflecting back the assumption that truth lived somewhere else. Now standing in the same field where he once felt confined, he saw no boundary, no division between sacred and ordinary, no gate between seeker and home. There had never been a door to re-enter, only the belief that he had stepped outside. And as the sun rose gently over the fields, Daiichi felt something he had chased across years of distance. Not ecstasy, not triumph, just belonging. The home he thought he had abandoned had never closed its doors. It had simply been waiting for him to stop standing outside it in his own mind. Daiichi believed he had left home in search of something greater, only to discover that home had never been the obstacle. The division between sacred and ordinary dissolved. The road did not lead elsewhere. It circled back into what had always been present. And yet even after return, a subtle misunderstanding can remain. We may accept the truth is not far away. We may see that it was never hidden in distant mountains, but we can still carry a quiet disappointment. It does not feel dramatic enough. It does not feel profound enough. It does not match the image we once held of awakening. So even at home we may whisper, "Is this really it?" Let us now meet someone who believed he had failed at spiritual life because the extraordinary never arrived. And through his disappointment, he would discover something even simpler than returning. In a quiet coastal village not far from where Aiko once sat by the sea, there lived a man named Taro. Unlike Daiichi, he had never dreamed of traveling far. Unlike Haru, he had never studied sacred texts. He was a fisherman. His days began before dawn. He pushed his small wooden boat into the tide while the sky was still dark blue. He cast his nets with practiced hands and waited for the slow pull of movement beneath the surface. For most of his life, this rhythm had been enough. The sea rose and fell. Fish were caught. Meals were shared. But in his 30s, something shifted. A traveling monk arrived in the village and spoke of awakening, of liberation from suffering, of profound insight that dissolved fear and longing. The monk described enlightenment as a great seeing, a clarity so deep that nothing could disturb it. Taro listened from the edge of the crowd. Salt still clung to his sleeves. His hands were rough from rope and wind. As the monk spoke, Taro felt a sudden ache. He had known worry. He had known anger. He had known the grief of losing a child to illness years earlier. If awakening meant freedom from suffering, then he did not have it. After the talk, he approached the monk quietly. "Can someone like me awaken?" Taro asked. The monk studied him gently. "Why not?" he replied. "I am not educated," Taro said. "I spend my days at sea. My mind is not refined." The monk smiled faintly. "The sea refines many things," he said. Encouraged, Taro began rising even earlier. He meditated before pushing out his boat. He repeated phrases the monk had taught him. He tried to observe his thoughts while casting nets. At first, he felt hopeful. There were moments of calm, moments when the horizon seemed vast and forgiving. But the sea was not always gentle. Storms came, nets tore, catches were poor. Anger returned, fear returned, grief surfaced unexpectedly. Each time Taro judged himself. If I were truly awakening, would I still feel this year's past? The monk moved on to other villages. Taro continued fishing. He compared himself to stories he had heard, of monks who smiled through hardship, of sages untouched by loss. He began to suspect he had failed. Perhaps awakening belonged to monasteries. Perhaps it required solitude and discipline he could not sustain. The sea did not feel enlightened. It felt unpredictable. And so did he. One winter, after a particularly violent storm destroyed several boats along the coast, Taro sat on the shore, staring at broken wood scattered along the sand. He felt tired, not only from labor, but from trying to become someone beyond himself. "I am not made for this path," he muttered. He stopped meditating, stopped repeating phrases. He returned to fishing as he had before the monk arrived. Yet something subtle lingered. Even in abandoning the practice, he could not fully abandon the question. Was awakening truly something dramatic? Something that erased grief and anger entirely? Or had he misunderstood? One morning, as he mended a torn net by the dock, an elderly fisherman named Kenji sat beside him. Kenji had never spoken of enlightenment. He rarely discussed philosophy. He simply repaired nets, day after day. "You look troubled," Kenji observed. Taro sighed. "I tried to awaken," he admitted. But I am still angry, still afraid, still grieving. I think I failed. Kenji continued, threading rope through the net. Failed at what he asked. At becoming free, Taro replied. Kenji paused, then looked out at the water. The sea still has waves, he said. Taro frowned. Yes, and yet Kenji continued. It does not fail at being the sea. Taro stared at him. The words were simple, almost dismissible, but they struck somewhere deep. He had believed awakening meant becoming calm water, still, untroubled. But the sea was never still for long. It roared, it crashed, it tore boats apart, and still it remained itself. Had he mistaken the absence of waves for depth, he looked down at the net in his hands. Its threads crossed and knotted in ordinary patterns. Nothing sacred, nothing luminous. Yet as his fingers moved carefully through the work, he felt something unexpected. Not transcendence, not revelation, just quiet attention. And within that attention there was no failure, only mending. The idea that he had missed a dramatic crossing began to loosen. Perhaps he had been standing before a gate that promised a life without storms. And when storms continued, he concluded he had not entered. But what if there was no such gate? What if awakening was not escape from the sea, but intimacy with it? The question lingered as the tide slowly rose. And for the first time in years, Taro did not feel like a failed seeker. He felt like a fisherman mending his net. The following days unfolded without ceremony. Taro rose before dawn as he always had. He pushed his repaired boat into the water. He cast his net into the shift's tide. Nothing mystical announced itself. No radiant insight descended from the sky. The sea behaved as it always did. Some mornings calm, some mornings restless, and so did he. There were moments of irritation when a catch slipped away. Moments of sadness when memory returned uninvited. Moments of quiet joy when sunlight spread like molten gold across the horizon. Previously, he had measured each of these states against an imagined standard. If I were awakened, I would not feel anger. If I were free, grief would no longer visit. If I had crossed the gate, fear would dissolve. But now, sitting alone in his boat as gulls circled overhead, a different understanding began to take shape. What if awakening was not the removal of waves, but the recognition of water itself? He dipped his hand into the sea. The surface rippled. The depth beneath remained vast and unseen. Storms disturbed only the upper layers. The ocean floor did not thrash with every gust of wind. Had he mistaken surface turbulence for total disorder? Years ago, when the monk had spoken of liberation, Taro had imagined a final crossing, a dramatic transformation into permanent calm. But the monk had also said something he had nearly forgotten. See clearly. See clearly. Not eliminate, not escape, not perfect. Just see. As the boat rocked gently, Taro observed his own thoughts without attempting to banish them. There is worry about tomorrow's catch. There is grief for what was lost. There is frustration at the torn rope. And beneath them, there is awareness. The waves moved, but something deeper did not move with them. He did not need to force stillness. He did not need to achieve a permanent state. He only needed to stop insisting that awakening look different from life. That afternoon, another storm gathered quickly over the water. Dark clouds thickened, wind rose abruptly. In the past, such weather would have felt like proof of his failure. See still chaos, still fear. But now, as he guided his boat carefully back toward shore, he noticed something subtle. Fear arose, his heart beat faster, his muscles tightened, and yet he was not fighting the fact that fear existed. He was responding to it, steering with it, working within it. The sea did not become less wild, but he no longer interpreted wildness as disqualification. By the time he reached land, rain was falling hard against the docks. Kenji stood waiting beneath a wooden shelter. "Rough day?" the old fisherman asked. Taro nodded, wiping water from his brow. "Yes," he said. Then after a pause, he added, "But not a failed one." Kenji smiled faintly. They worked together to secure the boat. No grand teaching was offered. No final declaration made. That evening, as Taro sat inside his small home, listening to rain strike the roof, he felt no need to evaluate his spiritual progress. He was not closer. He was not farther. He was simply here. The belief that awakening required extraordinary serenity had dissolved. There was no hidden gate separating fishermen from sages, no dramatic border between storms and peace. The sea had never promised stillness. It had only promised movement. And awakening, he now sensed, was not about changing the sea. It was about no longer demanding that it become something else. He closed his eyes briefly. Rain continued. Wind shifted. Within that changing soundscape, there was space. Not a space free of waves, but a space that did not resist them. For years, he had believed he stood outside liberation, because his life remained ordinary and turbulent. Now he saw that the gate he had imagined, the crossing into permanent calm, had never existed. He had not failed. He had only misunderstood what he was looking for. The sea was not meant to be still, and neither was he. Taro no longer waited for the sea to become still. He no longer measured himself against an image of permanent calm. The waves rose, the waves fell, and nothing essential was missing. At this point, a subtle shift begins to occur. If awakening is not elsewhere, if it is not perfection, if it is not approval, if it is not the removal of storms, then what remains? Sometimes after every imagined gate has dissolved, the mind searches for one final concept to hold, a final definition, a final certainty. We may begin asking, what exactly is this realization? What is its shape? What does it guarantee? And in that questioning, a new gate quietly forms, not made of effort or fear, but made of understanding itself. Let us now meet someone who believed that if he could just understand the truth clearly enough, then he would finally secure it. In a city known for its libraries and lecture halls lived a scholar named Riku. From a young age, Riku loved clarity. He loved definitions. He loved the clean architecture of ideas arranged precisely in their proper order. Where others felt overwhelmed by philosophy, he felt energized. He studied ancient texts. He compared translations. He debated subtle interpretations late into the night with other students. When he first encountered teachings about awakening, he was fascinated. If enlightenment was real, he reasoned it must have a structure, a logic, a set of conditions that could be described and understood. He collected books on the subject. He filled notebooks with diagrams. He traced connections between schools of thought. Some spoke of sudden insight, others of gradual cultivation. Some described emptiness, others spoke of fullness. Riku wanted to reconcile them all. If he could just map the territory accurately, he believed he would finally grasp it. He attended lectures by traveling teachers. He asked careful, precise questions. What is the exact moment of realization? Is awakening a state or an insight? Does it permanently alter perception? Teachers responded in different ways. Some answered in paradox. Some laughed softly. Some remained silent. Riku found this frustrating. Why avoid clarity? If something is true, it can be explained. One afternoon, he visited an elderly teacher known for her simplicity. Her home was modest. A low wooden table, a small window overlooking a courtyard. Riku bowed respectfully. "I have studied many teachings," he began. "I understand the concepts of non-duality, impermanence, and emptiness, yet I do not feel fully certain. I want to understand awakening completely." The teacher poured tea into 2 plain cups. "What would that give you?" she asked. "Security," Riku replied honestly. "If I understand it clearly, I will not be confused anymore." She handed him a cup. Steam rose gently between them. "And if confusion appears again?" she asked. Riku frowned. "If I truly understand, confusion should not appear." The teacher took a slow sip of tea. "When you study the concept of water," she said, "does that prevent you from ever feeling thirsty?" Riku hesitated. "No. When you map the stars," she continued, "does the sky stop changing?" He felt a flicker of irritation. "I am not speaking of ordinary knowledge," he said. "I am speaking of ultimate understanding." The teacher smiled gently. "And what shape do you imagine ultimate understanding takes?" Riku paused. He imagined a final diagram, a perfect model, a coherent synthesis of every teaching he had studied. A moment when all contradictions dissolved into one unified vision. He would know, without doubt, without ambiguity. "That," he said slowly, "is what I seek." The teacher placed her cup down. "For many years," she said, "you have built a gate made of concepts." Riku stiffened. "A gate?" "Yes," she replied. "You believe that if your understanding is precise enough, the gate will open and you will step into certainty." Riku looked at the book stacked beside him, his notes filled with arrows and annotations. "Was that not the path? If I do not understand," he argued, "how can I be free?" The teacher leaned back slightly. "Understanding is useful," she said. "It can point, it can clarify, but it cannot replace seeing." Riku frowned. "I see what the texts describe," he insisted. She shook her head gently. "You see descriptions. You see ideas about seeing." The words unsettled him. He had spent years refining his knowledge. Yet something inside him remained tense, still leaning forward, still waiting for the final synthesis. He had imagined awakening as the moment when his intellectual structure became flawless. No contradictions, no gaps, no uncertainty. But life itself was not structured that way. As he sat in the quiet room, listening to the faint sound of wind outside, a small crack appeared in his certainty. What if he had mistaken conceptual clarity for realization? The teacher stood and walked toward the window. "Tell me," she said softly, "when you drink tea, do you need to define warmth in order to feel it?" Riku looked down at his cup. The porcelain was warm in his hands. He did not need a definition to experience that. Yet he had been seeking a definition of awakening before allowing himself to rest. The gate, he imagined, was not made of effort or fear. It was made of explanation, and he had been standing before it for years, not yet broken, but no longer unquestioned. Riku left the teacher's home unsettled. The city streets felt the same as always. Vendors called out their prices. Students hurried past with books tucked beneath their arms. Nothing in the world had shifted, but something in his orientation had begun to loosen. For years he had believed that if he could arrange every teaching into a flawless structure, doubt would disappear. He had treated awakening like a theorem, If all premises were correct, the conclusion would be secure. That evening, he returned to his study. He opened his notebooks, pages filled with arrows, definitions, quotations. He read his own words carefully. They were precise, thoughtful, and yet as he examined them now, he noticed something subtle. Every explanation pointed to something beyond itself. Every definition depended on other definitions, like a map of a city he had never walked. He closed one notebook slowly. If awakening were an object to possess, then perhaps he could secure it through clarity. But what if it was not an object at all? The next morning he returned to the teacher. "I understand that concepts are limited," he said carefully. "But surely right understanding is necessary." She nodded. "Of course," she replied. "But necessary for what?" "For awakening," he said. She looked at him steadily. "Tell me," she asked, "before you formed the idea of awakening, were you absent?" Riku blinked. "Number. Before you defined non-duality, were you divided?" He hesitated. He had experienced confusion, yes, conflict, but she was pointing somewhere else. "Concepts divide in order to explain," she continued. "They create categories so the mind can navigate. But life itself does not separate so cleanly." She picked up a small bowl from the table. "If I describe this bowl perfectly," she said, "have I touched it?" Riku reached out instinctively and felt its surface, smooth, cool. The description and the contact were not the same. "For years," she said gently, "you have been describing the bowl of awakening." He felt heat rise in his face. "I wanted certainty," he admitted. "Yes," she said, "you wanted a conclusion that could not be shaken." He nodded. Life had always felt unstable. Ideas gave him ground. Definitions gave him edges. But awakening, he was beginning to suspect, had no edges. It could not be secured. It could not be finalized. It was not a possession. They sat in silence for a while. Riku watched thoughts arise and pass. Questions formed automatically. What is the nature of awareness? Is there a final realization? But instead of chasing each question into abstraction, he let them rest. He noticed the sound of a bird outside the window, the weight of his body on the cushion, the faint rhythm of his breath. None of these required explanation to occur. They were already happening. A quiet understanding dawned. He had been trying to hold awakening in his mind, to define it so clearly that it could never escape. But what he truly longed for was not conceptual mastery. It was ease, and ease did not come from perfect explanation. It came from no longer demanding that reality fit inside his diagrams. The teacher spoke softly. "When you stop trying to grasp the sky with your hands," she said, "you may notice it has always been above you." Riku exhaled slowly. He did not achieve a final theory that day. He did not unify every school of thought into a grand synthesis. Instead, something simpler occurred. He stopped insisting that awakening be something he could contain. He walked home without rehearsing definitions in his mind. The city was noisy, messy, unresolved, and for the first time he did not feel compelled to resolve it conceptually. The gate made of understanding had dissolved. Not because knowledge was useless, but because it had never been a doorway. It was only a pointer, and he no longer needed to mistake the map for the sky. Riku discovered that even understanding can become a gate. The desire to define awakening had quietly postponed the simplicity of being.
When explanation loosens, when perfection loosens, when approval and readiness and distance all loosen what remains. Sometimes after every visible gate has fallen, a deeper habit continues. The habit of striving itself. Not striving for perfection, not striving for recognition, not even striving for understanding, but striving to arrive. A subtle leaning toward a future moment when everything will finally feel complete. Even when we know there is no wall, we may still feel we are not quite there. Let us now meet someone who seemed to have achieved everything she once pursued, and yet still felt that arrival lay just ahead. In a lively market town surrounded by rolling hills, lived a woman named Hana. By every visible measure, Hana had done well. She had built a successful business from nothing. She had earned respect from her community. She had studied, practiced, reflected. In her youth, she had longed for independence. She achieved it. In her 20s, she had longed for stability. She created it. In her 30s, she had longed for insight. She attended retreats, read deeply, sat in silence for hours at a time. And yet beneath all her accomplishments, a subtle feeling persisted. Almost peaceful, almost fulfilled, almost free. It was not dissatisfaction exactly. Her life was not unhappy. But she carried a quiet leaning forward, a sense that something final was just beyond reach. If I continue refining myself, she thought there will come a day when I finally arrive where she could not define it clearly. But she felt its outline. A state where nothing more was needed, a moment when striving would end naturally, a completion. She noticed this tendency most during meditation. She would sit on her cushion, back straight, breath steady. Sometimes a deep calm would settle over her. Thoughts would slow. Her body would feel spacious and light, and immediately, a subtle thought would appear. This is close. Keep going. You're almost there. The thought seemed encouraging, motivating, but it also carried tension, because if she was almost there, then she was not yet there. The calm would tighten, the breath would lose its softness, and the moment would pass. Hana believed that one day the almost would dissolve into a definitive crossing. She imagined waking up one morning without that subtle leaning, without the sense of progress still required. She would finally rest. One afternoon, after closing her shop early, she visited an old friend named Sumi, who lived quietly at the edge of town. Sumi had once been as ambitious as Hana, but over the years she had grown remarkably simple. Her home was small, her routines unadorned. Hana admired her calm. "You seem content," Hana said as they shared tea. Sumi smiled. "I am," she replied. "How did you arrive there?" Hana asked. Sumi tilted her head slightly. Arrive where Hana laughed softly. "You know what I mean. That sense of being finished, of no longer searching." Sumi looked out the window toward the hills. "I stopped trying to finish," she said. Hana frowned. "But don't you feel you are growing?" she asked. "Of course," Sumi replied. "Life grows, seasons change. I learn new things, I forget others." "That's not what I mean," Hana said. "I mean spiritually." "Don't you feel you are approaching something?" Sumi's eyes were gentle. "I used to," she admitted. "I always felt I was approaching a final understanding. Just a little more patience, a little more refinement." And Hana leaned forward. "And one day I noticed that the feeling of approaching was the only thing preventing rest." The words landed quietly. Hana felt a small resistance rise. If she stopped approaching, would she become stagnant? Would she lose her discipline? But without striving, she asked, "How does one improve?" Sumi smiled faintly. "Improvement still happens," she said.
But it is not driven by lack, it is driven by responsiveness. Hana sat back. She realized that even after releasing perfection, after releasing approval, after releasing conceptual mastery, she still carried one final gate, the gate of arrival. She believed that peace lay at the end of a path, even if the path was short, even if it was subtle. She still imagined a final step, and as long as she imagined that step, she stood just before it. Not yet, almost. The sun began to lower beyond the hills. Warm light filled Sumi's small room. Hana felt the familiar leaning forward in her chest, the quiet urge to move toward a more complete version of herself, and for the first time she questioned it. What if there is no final step? What if the feeling of almost is simply another thought? She did not yet know how to stop leaning. But she had begun to see the movement, and that was the first crack in the final gate. That evening, after leaving Sumi's small home, Hana walked slowly through the market streets. Vendors were packing away their goods. Children ran past with the restless energy of late afternoon. The scent of baked bread drifted from a nearby stall. Ordinary sounds, ordinary light, and yet her mind was unusually quiet. Not silent, but watchful. She noticed the familiar impulse arise again. You are close. Reflect on what Sumi said. Integrate it. Move toward that state she described. There it was, the subtle leaning. Even now she was trying to progress toward the absence of progress. She almost laughed. For years she had refined herself, adjusted habits, strengthened discipline, deepened understanding. Each refinement felt valuable. But beneath it all was the assumption that she was incomplete, not broken, not lost, just not quite there. As she reached the edge of town, she paused on a small hill overlooking the valley. The sky was turning amber. Shadows stretched long across the fields. She asked herself quietly, if there is nowhere to arrive, what is lacking right now? The question did not demand philosophy. It did not require effort. She scanned her experience carefully. There was the sensation of wind brushing her cheek. There was the rhythm of breath. There was a faint ache in her legs from walking. Was anything missing from this moment? Her mind searched automatically for improvement, better clarity, deeper stillness, more spacious awareness. But each suggestion pointed toward a future version of now. Not this breath, the next one. She saw the pattern clearly. The mind did not know how to rest in immediacy. It survived by leaning. If she stopped leaning, what would remain? She did not attempt to suppress the impulse. She did not argue with it. She simply stopped following it. The feeling of almost arose again, a subtle tightening in her chest, and instead of moving toward its promise, she stayed. The tightening softened on its own. Another thought appeared. This might be it. This might be the moment of arrival. She smiled gently. That too was leaning. There was no dramatic breakthrough, no sudden expansion, only the gradual realization that the sense of almost had never been pointing to a real threshold. It was a habit of anticipation. Life was not waiting for her to finish becoming herself. The hills did not anticipate the next season in order to justify the current one. The sky did not lean toward a better sunset. They simply unfolded. Hana felt her body settle naturally. Improvement would still occur. Learning would still happen. Growth would still move through her days. But it no longer carried the weight of final arrival. There was no gate at the end of striving, because striving had been moving across open ground the entire time. She stood on the hill as the last light faded. For the first time in years, she did not feel she was becoming someone. She felt like someone who had stopped postponing herself. The sense of almost did not need to be conquered. It simply lost its authority when she stopped believing it described reality. And in that quiet shift, there was no arrival, only this, already whole, already complete in its incompleteness. The final gate dissolved without sound. There had never been a last step to take. She had been standing in the open field all along. When the sense of almost dissolved, nothing dramatic replaced it. No halo of certainty, no permanent state, just the simplicity of standing where one already stands. At this point, something very quiet begins to reveal itself. When there is no gate to cross, no approval to earn, no perfection to achieve, no final arrival to secure, life does not become extraordinary. It becomes intimate. The smallest gestures begin to carry a different weight. Washing a cup, opening a door, tasting a piece of fruit. Not because they are transformed into something mystical, but because nothing stands between you and them anymore. Let us now turn to a story where awakening does not appear in temples or mountains, or even in profound realization, but in something so ordinary it is often overlooked entirely. In a busy town known for its vibrant market, lived a merchant named June. June sold fruit. Every morning before sunrise, he arranged pears, plums, oranges, and apples in careful pyramids on a wooden stall near the center of the square. His fruit was always fresh. He knew which orchard each basket came from. He could judge ripeness with a gentle press of his thumb. Customers trusted him. Business was steady, and yet June rarely tasted what he sold. There was always something more important. A better display to arrange, a competitor to observe, a future expansion to plan. He measured his days in profit and projection. If this season goes well, he would tell himself, I will finally relax. If I open a second stall, I will feel secure. If I save enough, I will slow down. The fruit passed through his hands constantly. Smooth skins, sweet fragrance, subtle variations of color, but he experienced them as inventory, numbers, strategy, movement. One afternoon, an old woman approached his stall. She examined a pear carefully. Is it sweet? She asked. The orchard is known for sweetness, June replied confidently. She smiled gently. Have you tasted it? June paused. I don't need to, he said. I know my suppliers. The woman tilted her head. Still, she said, taste one. He hesitated. The market was busy. Customers moved around him. Time felt compressed. But something in her voice was calm, unhurried. June picked up a pear. He sliced a small piece and placed it on his tongue. Juice spread immediately. Sweet, bright, unexpectedly delicate. For a brief moment, he forgot the market, forgot calculations, forgot future plans. There was only flavor. He swallowed slowly. The old woman watched him. Well, she asked. June blinked. It's good, he said. She nodded. You sell sweetness every day, she said, but you do not taste it. Her words lingered long after she left. That evening, as June counted coins beneath lantern light, he felt something unsettled. He had assumed that living fully meant securing the future, that once stability was guaranteed, enjoyment would naturally follow. But years had passed, stability had increased, yet the promised enjoyment had not arrived. He remembered the pear, the brief, vivid simplicity of tasting. Why had that moment felt so different from the rest of his day? Nothing external had changed. The market was still loud, the responsibilities still real. Yet, for a few seconds he had not been leaning toward tomorrow. He had been here. The next morning, Jun arrived at his stall as usual. He arranged fruit with practiced efficiency. But before the first customer approached, he picked up an orange. He peeled it slowly, not to test quality, not to calculate value, just to experience it. The scent rose sharply. The texture yielded beneath his fingers. He tasted a segment, sweetness again, and something else, a quiet recognition. For years he had believed fulfillment was waiting at the end of accumulation. If I reach this target, then I will savor life. But life was not postponed in some distant ledger. It was present in the fruit already in his hand. The market grew louder as the morning progressed. Customers bargained. Children tugged at their parents' sleeves. Jun still worked, still sold, still planned. But now occasionally he paused. He noticed the color gradient of a plum, the weight of a melon, the simple rhythm of handing change across the counter. None of these moments were dramatic, but something invisible had shifted. He was no longer waiting for a future threshold before allowing himself to taste what was already here. The gate had not been made of difficulty. It had been made of distraction, and it had dissolved the moment he bit into a pear. In the days that followed, Jun did not abandon his ambitions. He did not close his stall. He did not renounce business and wander into the hills. He continued rising before dawn. He continued counting coins at night. But something subtle had changed in the way he moved through his hours. He noticed how often his mind leapt ahead. While arranging apples, it calculated next month's prices. While speaking to a customer, it rehearsed future negotiations. While eating his evening meal, it planned the following morning. The future had become a permanent residence, the present merely a corridor leading toward it. One afternoon, a young boy approached his stall and pointed eagerly at a cluster of grapes. "Are they sweet?" the boy asked. Jun almost responded automatically, but instead he picked one grape from the bunch and placed it in the boy's hand. "Tell me," he said. The boy bit into it. His eyes widened. "Yes," he exclaimed. Jun smiled, and before handing over the bag, he placed a grape in his own mouth. The sweetness was immediate, bright, alive. In that small exchange, Jun realized something quietly profound. He had built an invisible timeline. Work now, enjoy later, strive now, rest later. But later had no fixed address. It moved continuously. Each time he reached a goal, another appeared just ahead. Security was postponed, satisfaction deferred. He had assumed that tasting life required ideal conditions. Enough savings, enough expansion, enough certainty. But sweetness did not wait for numbers to align. It was available in the slice of pear, in the scent of citrus, in the weight of a coin pressed into his palm. That evening, as he closed his stall, he did something he had not done in years. He lingered. The market was quieter. Shadows stretched long across the square. He watched an elderly couple walk slowly past, sharing a paper bag of plums. They laughed softly at something only they understood. Nothing about the scene was remarkable. No revelation descended. Yet for the first time, Jun did not feel he was missing it. He was not calculating its value, not translating it into future advantage. He was simply there. He understood now that the gate had never been a barrier of difficulty. It had been a habit of postponement, the belief that life would begin after accumulation. But life had been unfolding through every transaction, every exchange, every unnoticed taste. The next morning, when he arranged his fruit once more, he did so with the same care. But care no longer meant urgency. It meant attention. He still planned. He still worked diligently. Yet he no longer treated the present as a means to a future moment of arrival. The sweetness was not stored in tomorrow. It had never been withheld. It had only been overlooked. And in seeing that, Jun felt something settle quietly inside him. There was no dramatic crossing into a new life, only the absence of leaning away from this one. The market noise continued. Customers came and went, but there was no longer a gate between him and the fruit in his hands, no distance between effort and experience. The sweetness had always been immediate. He had simply forgotten to taste it. Jun discovered that sweetness had never been postponed. It had only been unnoticed. When we stop leaning toward tomorrow, when we stop withholding presence until conditions improve, life begins to feel intimate, not extraordinary, not mystical, just immediate. And yet even here another subtle layer can remain.
We may taste the fruit, we may feel the breeze, we may stop, postpone enjoy, but we can still overlook something even quieter. The simple miracle of being alive at all. Let us now turn to a story of someone who did not search, did not strive, did not study philosophy, but who revealed something profound, simply by sitting beside a river. At the far edge of a quiet village where the land dipped gently toward a slow-moving river, lived an elderly woman named May.
May did not read sacred texts. She did not travel. She did not speak of awakening. Most afternoons, she carried a small wooden stool down to the riverbank and sat. She watched the water move. Children sometimes played nearby, skipping stones across the surface. Farmers crossed the narrow bridge upstream. Birds gathered along the reeds. May rarely joined in conversation. She did not instruct. She did not advise. She simply sat. Her granddaughter, Lian, often accompanied her. Lian was bright and curious, always full of questions about the world. "Grandmother," she asked one afternoon, "why do you sit here every day?" May smiled. "To watch the river," she replied. "But it's the same river," Lian said. May tilted her head slightly. "Is it?" Lian frowned and looked at the water. It seemed the same as yesterday, and the day before. "It looks the same," she insisted. May dipped her fingers into the current. The water slipped around her skin and continued downstream. "This water has never passed here before," she said softly, "and it will never pass here again." Lian watched more carefully. She noticed small leaves floating by, shadows shifting with the clouds, ripples forming and dissolving. Still, she did not fully understand. "Are you thinking about something while you sit?" Lian asked. "Sometimes," May said, "and sometimes I am just sitting." Lian could not imagine just sitting. Her mind was always moving, planning games, replaying conversations, imagining the future. "Don't you get bored?" she asked. May laughed softly. "When I was younger," she said, "I was often bored. I was waiting for something interesting to happen." "What happened?" Lian asked. "I grew tired of waiting," May replied. She picked up a small stone and rolled it gently in her palm. "For many years," she continued, "I believed life was happening somewhere else. In bigger towns, in grand events, in dramatic moments." Lian leaned closer, but now May looked at the river. "Now I see that life has never been elsewhere." The statement was simple, almost too simple. Lian followed her grandmother's gaze. The river moved without effort. Grass bent slightly in the wind. A dragonfly hovered, then darted away. Nothing extraordinary, nothing profound. And yet May's presence seemed complete. She was not searching the water for meaning. She was not trying to extract insight. She was not leaning towards a next moment. She was simply here. Leon felt something unusual, not excitement, not revelation, but a slowing, as if her thoughts had been running ahead and now they were gently settling beside her. "Grandmother," she asked quietly, "what are you looking for?" May turned toward her. "I am not looking," she said. Leon felt confused. Everyone she knew was looking for something. Better grades, better weather, better luck. Even the adults in the village were always discussing improvements. More land, more security, more time. But here was May, watching a river without a goal. As the sun began to lower, the water reflected streaks of orange and gold. Leon noticed how quickly the colors changed, how the reflection never held still. If she blinked, it was different. She realized something subtle. The river was never repeating itself, and yet it did not seem incomplete. May had not discovered a secret hidden inside the water. She had stopped demanding that the moment become something else. For years, she had believed meaning was hidden in special occasions, but meaning had been flowing past her every afternoon. No gate, no crossing, just water moving. Leon leaned back against her grandmother's shoulder. For a few quiet minutes, neither of them spoke. The river continued its gentle passage, and without trying to understand anything, without striving to improve the scene, Leon felt something rare. Not excitement, not achievement, just being alive beside the water. The following afternoon, Leon returned to the riverbank before her grandmother had even set down the small wooden stool. She wanted to see what she had missed all the other days she had rushed past this place. At first, nothing seemed different. The same bend in the water, the same cluster of reeds, the same distant hum of village life drifting faintly across the fields. But as she sat down, she noticed how quickly her mind began searching. What am I supposed to see? What is grandmother noticing that I am not? The habit was immediate. Even in stillness, she was looking for improvement, for insight, for something more. May lowered herself onto the stool beside her. "You are searching," she said gently. Leon flushed. "I want to understand what you see." May smiled. "I see water," she replied. "That's all, that's all." Leon felt a small frustration rise. Surely there was something deeper, some hidden wisdom. May pointed toward the surface of the river. "Look closely," she said. Leon focused. She noticed how the light fractured across tiny ripples, how insects skimmed briefly and disappeared, how a single leaf turned slowly as it drifted. Each movement was brief, unrepeatable. "If you try to hold any part of it," May said softly, "you miss it." Leon reached toward the water and cupped her hands. The current slipped through her fingers instantly. She laughed. "I can't keep it." May nodded. "Life is like that." Leon lowered her hands. Drops fell back into the river without resistance. For many years, May continued. "I believed I needed something more than what was happening. More excitement, more meaning, more certainty." And now Leon asked, "Now I see that the need for more was the only thing preventing me from seeing what already is." The statement felt almost too simple. Leon examined her own experience. There was the sound of wind brushing through reeds, There was the coolness of air against her skin. There was the rise and fall of breath in her chest. Was anything missing? Her mind tried to supply an answer. Something profound should occur, some dramatic realization. But nothing extraordinary happened. The river flowed, the light shifted, and gradually, without announcement, the sense of lack began to thin. She noticed how often she compared moments. This is dull. That was better. Later will be more interesting. Each comparison pulled her slightly away from what was here. When she stopped comparing, the moment felt complete on its own. Not because it was perfect, not because it was dramatic, but because it was not competing with anything. A fish broke the surface briefly, then vanished. Ripples expanded outward in widening circles. Leon watched until they disappeared. Nothing needed to be added to that movement. Nothing needed to be removed. May glanced at her granddaughter. "You see?" she asked. Leon nodded slowly. "I think so," she said. But what she understood could not be put into neat words. It was not a theory, not a conclusion. It was the simple absence of resistance. For years, May had believed she stood outside life waiting for something larger. Now she sat beside the river without seeking enlargement. Nothing had been withheld. The water had never required improvement. The sky had never needed refinement, and neither had the moment. As the sun dipped lower, casting long reflections across the current, Leon felt a quiet contentment. Not excitement, not triumph, just enoughness. The river did not announce its completeness. It simply moved, and in watching without trying to enhance or escape it, Leon sensed something profound in its ordinariness. There was no gate between her and the river. There never had been, only the thought that something else should be happening. When that thought softened, what remained was simple: water, breath, light, nothing missing. Transition to Story 13. When nothing is missing, the search becomes unnecessary. When the river does not need improvement, neither does the moment. At this stage of the journey, there is no longer a dramatic gate to dissolve, no illusion to tear down. Only a subtle habit remains, the habit of believing we must become someone before we can rest as we are. Even after tasting immediacy, even after seeing that nothing is withheld, there can still be a faint identity we carry, the seeker, the one on the path, the one who is progressing. Let us now turn to a story of someone who wandered for many years only to discover that what he called the journey had always been unfolding exactly where he stood. For more than 40 years, a man named Ken traveled. He crossed deserts where the wind erased his footprints within minutes. He crossed mountain passes where the air thinned into sharp silence. He crossed oceans packed tightly into wooden ships that groaned against the waves. In every country he searched. He visited monasteries carved into cliffs. He listened to teachers who spoke in riddles and teachers who spoke in precise logic. He slept beneath trees older than recorded history. At first, he traveled with excitement. Each new place felt like possibility. If truth existed, surely it would reveal itself somewhere extraordinary. When early journeys did not bring a final answer, he adjusted his approach. Perhaps the problem was not distance, but depth. So he meditated more seriously. He fasted. He withdrew from conversation. He disciplined his body and his mind. There were moments, luminous, expansive, when the world felt transparent, when the boundary between himself and the horizon softened. But each time the clarity faded, and Ken interpreted this fading as failure. If realization were genuine, it would not disappear. If he had truly crossed over, he would not return to ordinary thought. So he continued. He became known in certain circles as the tireless traveler. People admired his persistence. They asked for stories of distant lands. He told them of silent temples in the snow, of teachers who lived in caves, of cities where thousands gathered to hear spiritual talks. But privately, he carried a quiet exhaustion. The map of the world had grown smaller in his memory, the border crossings less dramatic, the teacher's words less dazzling. Eventually, in his later years, he found himself in a small coastal town he had never intended to visit. He had meant only to rest briefly before continuing inland. The town was unremarkable. No ancient monastery, no revered teacher, just fishermen mending nets, children chasing gulls, an elderly man sweeping sand from the steps of a modest house. Ken rented a small room overlooking the sea. He told himself he would stay for a week. The first morning he walked along the shore before sunrise. The sky slowly shifted from deep indigo to pale gold. He had seen countless sunrises in deserts, in mountains, across oceans. This one did not differ in grandeur. And yet as he stood there, something in him did not move toward analysis. He did not compare it to others. He did not measure its beauty against memory. He simply watched light touch the water. The thought arose automatically. This is peaceful, but he did not cling to it. Another thought followed. Perhaps the answer is near. He smiled faintly. Even here, even after decades of travel, the mind was still searching, still assuming that something decisive lay just ahead. Later that day, he passed the elderly man who had been sweeping the steps. "You have traveled far," the man observed without introduction. Ken nodded. "Yes, I have crossed many borders." The man leaned on his broom. "And have you arrived?" he asked. Ken opened his mouth and paused. He had rehearsed many answers to that question over the years. Philosophical responses, humble admissions, paradoxical statements. But none felt accurate. "I am still traveling," he said at last. The old man studied him quietly. Perhaps he said gently, "It is the idea of traveling that has not ended." The words lingered. Ken felt a subtle resistance. He had dedicated his life to seeking, to movement, to crossing thresholds. If the journey itself were the illusion, what would remain of his identity? That evening he sat in his small rented room, listening to the distant rhythm of waves. He realized that every time he reached a new place, he had carried the same assumption: I am not yet there. And so, every destination became another starting point. He had crossed borders of land and language, but had he ever questioned the border in his own mind? The border between seeker and sought, between traveler and arrival. As night settled over the coastal town, Ken felt something begin to loosen. Not a revelation, not an awakening, just a quiet doubt about the necessity of continuing. For the first time in decades, he did not plan the next route. He did not consult maps. He did not calculate distances. He simply listened to the sea. And in that listening, the sense of being a traveler, a man moving towards something, began to soften, not yet gone, but no longer unquestioned. Ken remained in the coastal town longer than he intended. A week passed, then another. Each morning, he walked the shoreline without deciding where to go next. Each evening he returned to the same small room overlooking the sea. The absence of movement felt unfamiliar, almost unsettling. For decades, his identity had been built on direction, on departure, on the next crossing. Without a destination, who was he? One afternoon, he found the elderly man again, sweeping sand from the steps. "You are still here," the old man said. "Yes," Ken replied. "And where will you go next?" Ken opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time in years, he did not have an answer prepared. "I don't know," he said honestly. The old man nodded. "Good," he replied. Ken felt a small ripple of irritation. He had spent his life seeking clarity. And here was this man treating uncertainty as something natural. "Don't you ever wish to travel?" Ken asked. The old man smiled faintly. "I have crossed many borders," he said. Ken looked around at the modest houses, the simple dock, the narrow streets. When he asked, the old man tapped his chest lightly. "Here." Ken frowned. "I don't understand." The old man rested the broom against the wall. "For many years," he said, "I believed I was separate from life. I thought I stood outside it, moving towards something more complete." Ken felt a quiet recognition stir. "That is why you traveled," the old man continued. "You believed there was a border between where you are and what you seek." Ken did not deny it. Every journey had been built on that assumption. The next monastery, the next teacher, the next land, each one promising a crossing. "But tell me," the old man asked, gently, "have you ever found the exact place where you stepped outside of life?" Ken stood still. He searched his memory. The first departure from home, the first ship boarded, the first mountain climbed. In every memory, he was simply living. There had been no visible line, no moment when existence paused and placed him outside itself. He had assumed separation, but he had never located it. "And if you never left," the old man said quietly, "what have you been trying to re-enter?" The question landed without force. Ken felt something give way inside him. He had imagined awakening as returning home, as crossing back into something lost. But perhaps he had never exited. Perhaps the sense of being a traveler, of moving toward, had been a story layered over simple presence. That evening, Ken walked to the shore again. The sea moved in its steady rhythm. Waves folded into sand, retreated, returned. He watched without evaluating, without asking whether this was the place. He noticed how each wave appeared separate, yet none were independent of the ocean. For years he had seen himself as a wave crossing toward the ocean. But he had always been water. The traveler was not wrong. The journeys were not wasted. But the border he believed he was crossing had never existed. There was no outside to step back in from. As night settled, Ken felt no dramatic illumination, only a profound ordinariness. The sea did not congratulate him. The sky did not open. He did not become someone new. He simply stopped narrating himself as someone on the way. The identity of traveler softened, not erased, but no longer necessary. The next morning, when the old man asked again, "Will you leave?" Ken smiled. Perhaps, he said, and perhaps not. For the first time in his life, movement did not imply search. Staying did not imply stagnation. There was no border to cross, only this step, this breath, this shoreline. He had crossed every border the world offered, and discovered there had never been one within. Ken discovered that the border he had tried to cross had never existed. The journey had not been wrong. The traveling had not been wasted, but the idea of somewhere else had quietly dissolved. When the seeker softens, when the traveler rests, when the need to re-enter life fades, what remains not achievement, not enlightenment as spectacle, just a quiet settling. There comes a moment, sometimes subtle, almost invisible, when a person simply stops searching, not because they found a final answer, not because they reached a perfect state, but because the impulse to look elsewhere loses its urgency. Let us now turn to someone who did not experience a grand awakening, but who one day quietly realized that the search itself had come to an end. There was once a man named Isamu who had spent most of his life improving himself, not dramatically, not obsessively, but steadily. He read books on discipline, he attended lectures on mindfulness, he kept journals filled with reflections about how he might become calmer, wiser, kinder. Each year he set small goals: speak more patiently, react less quickly, meditate longer. He was not tormented by dissatisfaction. He simply believed growth was endless. There was always a slightly better version of himself just ahead. And so he continued refining. If he noticed irritation, he worked to soften it. If he noticed pride, he worked to humble it. If he noticed distraction, he trained his focus. From the outside, he appeared admirable, measured, thoughtful. But privately, he carried a quiet tension. He was never fully at ease with who he was. There was always a small correction to make, a subtle adjustment to apply. One evening, after returning from a lecture about becoming your highest self, Isamu sat alone at his kitchen table. The house was quiet, the day complete. He reached for his journal to record what he had learned. But instead of writing, he paused. He felt tired, not physically, tired of becoming. For decades, he had been leaning gently toward improvement. The leaning was not harsh. It was almost noble. But it never stopped. Even his spiritual practice had become a subtle project. One more insight, one more layer of ego dissolved, one more refinement. He closed the journal slowly. A simple question surfaced. What if nothing needs to be improved right now? The thought felt almost irresponsible. Would that not lead to stagnation, to laziness? Yet beneath the fear was a softer curiosity. What if for this moment I do not attempt to become someone better? He did not declare an end to growth. He did not renounce learning. He simply set the pen down. The refrigerator hummed softly. A clock ticked in the hallway. He noticed how quickly his mind tried to evaluate the moment. Am I doing this correctly? Is this acceptance or avoidance? Should I be practicing something? He almost smiled. Even resting had become a technique. He leaned back in his chair. For the first time in years, he did not aim at a future self. He did not measure his current state against an ideal. He simply sat. There was still impatience in him, still habits, still imperfections. But he did not move to correct them. He allowed them to be present without turning them into a project. The room did not glow. The air did not change. Yet something subtle loosened. The pressure to arrive, somewhere, even somewhere slightly improved, faded. He realized that most of his life had been spent gently negotiating with himself. I will be enough when I am calmer. I will be enough when I am more disciplined. I will be enough when I am less reactive. But enoughness had always been postponed into refinement. Sitting at the kitchen table, he saw clearly that the search had never been loud. It had been polite, respectable, but it was still search. And in this quiet evening, without ceremony, he simply stopped. Not forever. Not as a vow, just for now. And in that stopping, there was no dramatic awakening. Only a gentle absence of striving. The search had not concluded with a final answer. It had softened into silence. The next morning, Izamu woke as he always had. The same light filtered through the curtains. The same faint stiffness lingered in his shoulders. Nothing about the world had rearranged itself to reward his quiet decision the night before. And yet something felt subtly different. When he brushed his teeth, he noticed the familiar mental commentary begin. You should be more mindful. Stand straighter. Breathe more slowly. For years, such thoughts had guided him like a soft instructor standing just behind his shoulder. But this time, he did not obey automatically. He did not resist either. He simply heard the commentary and continued brushing. No correction, no improvement. Just the sensation of bristles against teeth. The cool taste of mint. The simple act unfolding. Later at work, a colleague spoke sharply to him during a meeting. Izamu felt irritation rise instantly, a tightening in his chest, a reflex to defend himself. Normally, he would have analyzed the reaction afterward. He would have written about it in his journal. He would have created a plan to respond more skillfully next time. But today, he noticed something else. The irritation did not need to be repaired. It rose, it lingered, it passed, without turning it into a project. He was not proud of his reaction. He was not ashamed of it. It simply occurred. Throughout the day, small imperfections continued to appear. Moments of distraction, a careless remark, a forgotten task. Each one invited the old habit of refinement. Become better, adjust, optimize. But Izamu saw the invitation clearly now, and for once he declined. Not out of apathy, not out of resignation, but out of curiosity. What happens if I allow myself to be unfinished? The question did not produce laziness. In fact, he still completed his work. He still apologized where necessary. He still acted responsibly. But the inner tension, the constant tightening toward a superior version of himself, loosened. That evening, he returned home and sat again at the kitchen table. The same clock ticked in the hallway. The same refrigerator hummed. He felt no need to record insights, no need to measure progress. He realized something profound in its simplicity. All his life, he had believed peace was the result of successful self-improvement. But peace had not arrived when he improved. It arrived when he stopped negotiating with himself, when he stopped saying, I will accept you once you change. He looked around the room. The paint was slightly chipped near the door. A small crack ran along the edge of the table. Nothing was flawless, yet the room did not strive to become better. It simply existed. He laughed softly at the thought. For decades, he had treated himself as a renovation project. But what if he was not a building under construction? What if he was already standing, weathered, imperfect, alive? The ease he felt was not dramatic. It did not glow. It was almost indistinguishable from ordinariness, and that was precisely its depth. He saw that stopping the search did not freeze growth. Growth still occurred naturally. Habits shifted. Understanding deepened, but they no longer carried the burden of proving worth. Nothing essential had been lacking. The search had not ended in triumph. It had faded in recognition. There was no gate labeled improved enough. There had only been the quiet assumption that such a gate existed. As night settled gently around his home, Isamu felt no need to secure the state he was in. He did not fear losing it. He did not cling to it, because it was not a state. It was the absence of striving, and striving could return tomorrow, or not. Either way, nothing would be missing. For the first time in his life, he understood something without framing it as insight. He did not need to become someone better in order to rest. He could rest now, unfinished, unpolished, unresolved, and in that, rest in the long, respectful search that had shaped his life simply fell quiet. When striving falls quiet, life does not end. It continues. Dishes are washed, conversations unfold, seasons change. But something fundamental is no longer in motion. The sense of being on the way to oneself. At this point in the journey, nothing needs to be added. Nothing needs to be removed.
Even the idea of journey begins to feel unnecessary. There's no final teaching to receive, no last illusion to dissolve, only this simple living presence. Let us enter the final story, not as a climax, not as a revelation, but as the quiet recognition that what we have been seeking has always been the one who was seeking it. There was no announcement, no final teacher, no gathering of witnesses, only a morning. In a modest home at the edge of a quiet town, a woman named Aya woke before sunrise. She was neither a seeker nor a scholar. She had not traveled across borders. She had not sat in monasteries. Her life had been simple: work, family, loss, joy, ordinary seasons passing without spectacle. On this particular morning, nothing unusual occurred. She opened her eyes. She listened to the faint sound of wind outside her window. She felt the warmth of blankets around her shoulders. And for a moment before thought gathered, there was only awareness. Not mystical, not heightened, just simple presence. Then the mind began its familiar movements, plans for the day, reminders, fragments of memory. But something subtle was different. She did not follow them. She did not push them away. They moved like clouds across a wide sky. Aya had spent much of her earlier life trying to improve her circumstances. When she was young, she believed happiness would come with achievement. When she faced hardship, she believed peace would return once problems were solved. She had known longing, she had known disappointment. But over the years, without dramatic insight, without spiritual ambition, something had softened. She had grown tired of postponing contentment. On this morning, lying quietly in bed, she noticed there was no anticipation of a better moment. No sense of being incomplete. The day had not yet begun. Nothing had been accomplished, and nothing was missing. She sat up slowly. Her feet touched the cool floor. She walked to the kitchen and poured water into a kettle. The ordinary sounds of morning filled the house. The click of the stove, the faint hum as water began to heat. For years, she would have treated these sounds as background, merely the prelude to something more important. But now there was no prelude. This was it. She stood by the window while waiting for the water to boil. The sky was shifting from dark blue to pale gray. She did not interpret it. She did not name it beautiful. She simply saw it. Nothing in her life had resolved perfectly. There were still uncertainties, still unfinished tasks. But the impulse to become complete before resting had faded. She realized something quietly astonishing. All her life, she had assumed that fulfillment was an event, a turning point, a crossing. But fulfillment was not an event. It was the absence of resistance to what is already here. The kettle clicked softly as the water finished boiling. Aya
poured it into a cup. Steam rose in delicate spirals. She held the cup in both hands, felt its warmth. There was no insight to secure, no identity to dissolve. Only this. She took a sip. The taste was simple, unremarkable, and entirely sufficient. Outside, the first bird began to sing. The day unfolded, not as a climax, not as the reward for a completed journey, but as life without the story that it must lead somewhere else. Aya did not think of herself as awakened. She did not declare the end of searching. She simply moved through her morning without leaning forward. And in that absence of leaning, the long arc of human seeking, searching for worth, searching for readiness, searching for perfection, searching for approval, searching for better condition, searching for elsewhere, searching for calm, searching for understanding, searching for arrival fell quiet. Nothing had been attained. Nothing had been lost. The morning was not special, and that was its quiet completeness. The day moved forward without ceremony. Aya washed her cup. She opened the door to let in fresh air. She greeted a neighbor walking past the gate. Small gestures, unremarkable exchanges. Yet something fundamental had shifted in a way that required no announcement. There was no internal narrator whispering, "This is it. This is awakening." There was no need to preserve the morning's quiet clarity. No effort to stabilize it. Thoughts continued to arise. Plans formed. Memories surfaced. But none of them implied that something else needed to happen before life could begin. Midday brought difficulty. A delayed payment. A minor disagreement. A sudden headache. Previously, such interruptions would have been interpreted as obstacles on the path to a better state. Now they were simply part of the same fabric. The disagreement did not threaten her sense of completeness. The headache did not signal a fall from grace. Experience unfolded in waves pleasant and unpleasant without dividing life into success and failure. In the afternoon, Aya walked through the market. She passed stalls of fruit fabric and fresh bread. She noticed a pear in a basket. For a fleeting moment, sweetness from another life might have seemed symbolic. But now it was only a pear. Round, textured, ordinary. She did not need to extract meaning from it. She did not need to turn it into metaphor. She simply continued walking. Late in the evening, she sat by the window once more. The sky darkened gradually. There was no conclusion to draw, no final sentence forming inside her mind. The journey, if it had ever existed, had dissolved into immediacy. There was no traveler left to arrive, no border left to cross, no gate left to open. Even the idea of resting felt unnecessary. Rest implied contrast with striving. But striving had already quieted. What remained could not be named as attainment. It was too simple for that. Breath, moving in and out. Light, fading from the sky. The soft rhythm of existence continuing without commentary. If someone had asked her what she had discovered, she would not have known how to answer. She had not discovered anything. She had stopped overlooking what had always been here. Night settled gently across the town. Windows dimmed one by one. Aya stood and turned off the lamp. There was no final insight to secure before sleep. No state to maintain. Only the natural closing of the day. In that simplicity, the long story of seeking so ancient and so human came to rest, not in triumph, but in ordinariness. Nothing beyond this, and nothing lacking within it. And so, the journey that never truly began comes gently to rest. We have walked through searching and striving, through worthiness and readiness, through perfection approval and the hope that life would calm down first. We have followed the traveler across borders, the scholar through concepts, the merchant through sweetness, the grandmother beside the river, the fisherman in the storm, the woman who was almost there. Each believed in some quiet way that something stood between them and peace. A gate, a threshold, a future moment, and one by one those gates dissolved. Not with force, not with triumph, not with revelation blazing across the sky, but with softness, with the simple recognition that nothing essential had ever been withheld. If you have listened closely tonight, you may have noticed something subtle. There was no grand technique offered, no final doctrine revealed, no special state to attain.
Only the gradual falling away of the belief that you are standing outside your own life right now as you lie here, perhaps feeling the weight of blankets, perhaps hearing the faint hum of the night around you. There is no gate between you and this moment. You do not need to become calmer to deserve rest. You do not need to understand more to be complete. You do not need to fix yourself before you are allowed to soften. Breath is already moving. The body already knows how to settle. The night does not demand improvement from you before it allows you to sleep. Let everything be unfinished. Let thoughts drift without resolution. Let today remain imperfect. Nothing is missing from this moment. And if tomorrow, the mind begins searching again for clarity, for certainty, for progress, that too can be allowed. Because even the search has always happened inside the openness you never left. Thank you for spending this quiet time here. If these stories have helped you soften, if they have offered even a small space where striving fell silent for a while, you are warmly invited to return. Here at the Long Night, we create these gentle journeys so you can rest without pressure, reflect without effort, and fall asleep without needing to solve anything first. If this space feels like home to you, consider subscribing not as another task to complete, but as a quiet way of staying connected to evenings like this. There will be more stories, more soft dissolving of invisible gates, more nights where nothing needs to be achieved. For now, there is nothing left to understand. Only this breath, this darkness, this gentle descent into sleep. May your rest be deep. May your mind be light. May tomorrow arrive without urgency. Good night.